Alrighty, already. Sorry about the delay. I could have sworn I told myself I wouldn't do these delays, but it just keeps happening. Welcome back to another thrilling installment of Mecha Mondays. I'm your intrepid narrator, Pilot Fraggeth, and today we're going to be reading through some of Book 1 of Full Metal Panic. I forgot the exclamation point in everything, it occurs to me. There's an exclamation point after Panic. Um, anyway, book one is entitled Fighting Boy Meets Girl. It gives us an introduction to pretty much the entire cast. Um, most of our recurring cast members. There might be one or two that don't in this first book. No, no, we do. If we have any scenes on the Tuatha De Danann, we definitely do. Uh, we are not going to encounter all of our antagonist cast just yet, however. In fact, we're not going to encounter some of them until quite a few books in. But we will have hints and murmurs of them. Um, Parts of this series play the long game. There are some pretty. You will wait a long time for certain plot points to get their reciprocal build-up and payoffs. Uh, so it winds up doing one thing I will give it. It starts out kind of rough. It's going to be like, okay, some part of it you're going to be attached to, some parts you're not. Um, as for playing the long game, it does a pretty good job of both playing the long game and having like short, fillery interludes that do generally have some degree of character development in them in some way, shape, or form. It's a balancing act, and it does it, and it gets better as the series goes on. That I can broadly promise you. Um, it's not perfect. If you are even passingly familiar, as I say in the stream description, if you're even passingly familiar with high school romantic comedy tropeisms and the like, there are probably not going to be too many instances of new ideas here for you, um, for better or for worse. Oh no, we are going to have. So some of our villains we are going to get introduced to, recurring antagonists, which is good because we need to in order to move the plot along. I can't remember a lot of what happens in, in this first volume. It gets increasingly crazy the further on we go. Um, so one thing that is nice about this is there is a bunch of not only cover art but also mid book art that'll like detail a scene or two. And I'm pretty sure I have most of the ones that are relevant. There's one or two I don't have, which is unfortunate. But the ones I have are pretty good, for better or for worse. I believe the illustrator for all of them is Shiki Doji. Um, this is kind of his one of that person's big claims to fame, as they did all the art for this. There's some black and white art that I don't have, unfortunately. And there's a couple of the first edition cover arts that I don't have. I can try to look for those, but the places where I was having difficulty finding them in any degree of quality that I considered worth a gosh darn. Anyway, um, things will get very wild by the end. But to start off, it's going to be moderately by the numbers, and then kind of goes on a steady escalation curve. Sorry. Uh, so yeah, we've got a combination of rom-com elements. We've got some military thriller with an emphasis on mecha interactions. And yeah, let's see. When did this first get its publishing date here? So the first volume was published in 98 by Kadokawa, who did the distribution here. J Novel Club did the distribution and publishing in America, at least for my edition. I'm trying to find their publishing copyright date when they published it here, and I'm not seeing it. I know it was not concurrent. Okay, I say I know that it was not concurrent. I don't actually know that it was not concurrent. Not for sure without looking it up. Um, this does not tell me much. No, 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 no. You'd think that would be right there on the page, but it is not. Oh, here we go. First printing, January 2020. At least that's the edition that I'm holding, and my edition is the reciprocal collector's edition, book one. I do have cover art for all of these, so they are all kind of a dark gray. Um, it's not a black. It's a dark gray with slightly indented um, metallic silvery text, as well as the illustration there, and that is of one of our titular mechs. I believe that's the Arbalest there, and not the J9 Gernsback. I am going to have to look to see if I can find line art for the mechs. There is not a massive variety of them, but they are pretty cool. Um, Most of the important headliner mechs are going to be on the cover art in some way, shape, or form. They're pretty good about that. Some of them, unfortunately, will not, and that's why I need to look for the line art. They're fairly distinctive. I do have to make sure that I find the ones that are actually done by Shikidoji, because I think they look better than some of the redesigns that have been done. I think Hajime Katoki did some redesigns, and unfortunately, I don't like his redesigns by and large, and that maybe is an unpopular opinion. But his basic ethos for doing a redesign involves taking anything that's a hard edge and then flattening it into a thin plane, and it doesn't work for me. His original, it's funny because his original designs, a lot of his original designs are really, really top notch. Hugely fond of the Victory Gundam. Hugely fond of the Victory 2. Um, that's before he just took flat planes and took hard edges and flattened them into planes. He had a more rounded style then. Um, I think he also did the S and XS, which are design cluster fudges, but that makes sense for the time period in which they're coming from. Anyway, that's enough blather from me with a long enough intro. Let's get cracking. It is not going to be a terribly long stream because I want to divide these up a bit. How long is the first volume here? Where are you? That's still chapter 4. They're not long. Um, like the first volume is, Jesus, I don't know, maybe 200 pages. Actually, 175 pages, give or take, including the afterword. Yeah, it's around that. So probably like 3 installments per. Um, anyway, yeah, probably like 3 installments per. I guess that's what I'd speculate, wouldn't I? Surely. There are a bunch of characters in here. I may decide I don't like some of the voices I use for them initially, and they may change. I doubt it, but it could happen. Um, I'm pretty sure I have a fair mental image. I know how I have certain characters sounding in my head, but I don't know if that works too well. Mostly the sticking point is a character named Kurtz, because he's technically German, but his character archetype is not. is not quite the same. Anyway, without further ado, let's get cracking. Um, with Full Metal Panic exclamation point. Collector's Edition 1. Book 1. Where's the title page? Anyway, I just lost my page. It's okay, I'll find it in a minute. Yeah, let's get cracking. Let me put myself on mute a minute while I sneeze. Full Metal Panic, Book 1, Fighting Boy Meets Girl, by Shouji Gatou. Translated by Elizabeth Ellis. A.S. In English. Noun. Military. Word forms. Arm slave. Assault soldier. A.S. Slave. Definition. From Armored Mobile Master Slave System. Kenkyusha New English Japanese Dictionary, 5th edition. Arm slave. Definition. A humanoid machine roughly 8 meters tall that serves as an armed and armored assault weapon, developed in the late 1980s. Assault soldier. A.S. Iwanami Kojien Dictionary, 4th edition. Prologue. You got it, Sosuke? We need 2,000 sheets of A4 paper. Chidori Kaname stood before the door to the teacher's office. Against the casual clamor of a high school after class, her tone was sharp and serious. She had black hair that went all the way down her back, accented by a red ribbon, and there was a glint of determination in her eyes. She wagged her finger at the student before her. The paper comes in packs of 500, so we need to sneak out 4 in total. Got it? Understood. The boy in the high-collared uniform, Sagara Sosuke, responded concisely. His own expression was blank and slightly stiff, his mouth a tight, disagreeable frown. His eyes, sharp and penetrating, were focused on the door to the teacher's office. One last time, Kaname and Sosuke reviewed their operation. You know where the paper is stored, right? She asked him. Yes, he replied shortly, next to the copier in the back of the room. And what was the plan we agreed on? You'll start up a conversation with the teacher closest to the copier, Mr. Sayama. While he's distracted, I'll steal the paper. Then we withdraw with due haste. Kaname folded her arms and nodded in satisfaction. Yes, excellent. Remember, if the teachers had gotten us the right info in the first place, we wouldn't have ended up with 2,000 misprinted pamphlets. The student council have a right to recoup our losses. Justice is on our side. Rather than argue with her tortured logic, Sosuke turned the conversation elsewhere. What if you fail to monopolize Mr. Sayama's attention, and he sees me? She groaned. Do something so he doesn't see you then. Do something? All right, I'll do something. Perfect. Okay, Sosuke, let's go! Kaname stepped into the teacher's office with Sosuke behind her. Shooting friendly hellos to the teachers she recognized, she made her way to the beat-up black and white copier at the back of the room. Next to it sat her social studies teacher, a man in his early 40s. Hey there, Mr. Sayama, she chirped. Well, hello, Chidori. What can I do for you, eh? Mr. Sayama's chair squeaked as he turned. Kaname positioned herself between him and the copier corner, presumably blocking Sosuke from sight. I just have a little question about yesterday's class. Oh, that was on ancient India, I think. Mr. Sayama trailed off. What is it, eh? Okay, so I was wondering, Kaname began. Why did Chandragupta II have such a weird name? Her teacher laughed. What a silly question. Well, now, you see, it refers to the Gupta Empire, which, he went on to explain. But before he could get any further, there was a pop like a firecracker. Thick white smoke began to billow from behind where Kaname was standing. Huh? She tried to turn around and look, but the smoke was everywhere, cutting visibility to 0. What's going on, eh? Hey, someone! Mr. Sayama shouted through coughing from somewhere nearby. The smoke had quickly filled the room, and all the teachers were now in hysterics. What's going on? Kaname lurched to a nearby filing cabinet for support, also coughing and struggling to breathe. Just then, someone grabbed her arm. Sosuke? We've done what we came for, he told her seriously. It's time to pull out. Hey, she protested. Sosuke had emerged from the smoke, holding the packs of paper under one arm. He grabbed Kaname's hand with his free one and sprinted with her toward the office door. It was just then that the sprinklers activated, catching the room in a downpour. Help! Fire! Earthquake! Flood! My word processor! Cutting past the screams of panicked teachers all around them, Sosuke and Kaname flew out the door. They made it as far as the skyway to the northern building before they stopped. We should be safe now, Sosuke panted. Both of them were drenched from the sprinklers. Kaname wrung out the hem of her skirt, her eyes hollow and exhausted. What in the world did you... I used a smoke bomb, he said evenly. You did what? You told me to do something. Eliminating visibility allowed us to retrieve the paper without being seen. It was much more effective than your crude diversion tactic. Sosuke explained. Now, we just need to fake a call claiming responsibility from a terrorist organization like the IRA or the Japanese Red Army, and we'll be able to completely divert suspicion. Slam! A right hook from Kaname sent Sosuke spinning to the floor. For about 3 seconds, he lay there motionless. Then, suddenly, he sat up again. That hurt. You shut the hell up! Kaname yelled. You war-obsessed pathological downer! Do you not realize that you ruined the paper? You know, the whole reason we did this? She rubbed one of the now limp, dripping packs in his face. It should be usable after it dries, he protested. Don't you dare try to excuse this! She fumed. I can't believe your stupidity. I don't care what kind of awesome mercenary AS pilot you are. You won't get anywhere without basic common sense! Sosuke fell silent, his expression intense, greasy sweat forming on his brow. Through the fog of her rage, Kaname managed to see that his feelings were hurt. He had probably meant well, she realized, in his own ridiculous way, but that innocence just made the situation even more frustrating. Oh, for the love of... Kaname clutched her head in her hands. Sagara Sosuke had spent his childhood in war-torn regions overseas. He had no concept of how to act here in a peaceful country like Japan. His inability to behave according to others' expectations, and vice versa, made him a constant source of trouble for everyone around him. He's stupid, incredibly stupid, was the school-wide consensus about Sosuke. Ugh, why must I have this worthless freak in my life? Tell me, God, she lamented. But, naturally, no answer came. Well, the truth was, she already knew why. There was a reason she hadn't written off his pain-in-the-ass self a long time ago. She had a responsibility to look after him, to explain things to him, to smooth over any chaos he caused. And she had a very good reason not to hate him. Sosuke had entered her life through a set of very complicated circumstances. Yeah, that's right. It all came rushing back to her. Sagara Sosuke wasn't war-obsessed or worthless. Take him out of his peaceful setting and he'd snap into a first-rate soldier. He was part of a real organization. He had comrades in arms. Kaname knew about all of it, thanks to one particular incident, the one that had brought them together. The terrible danger she found herself in, the undeniable feelings that had blossomed between them, and the sprawling mystery whose scope remained beyond her comprehension, everything that had come from that incident now formed the reality of the daily life they shared. That's right, Kaname remembered. It all started about a month ago. Chapter 1. Mission to School. 15 April, 21:37 hours, local time. 80 kilometers southeast of Khabarovsk, Soviet Union.
Just kill me,
The girl thought. The car jostled her back and forth as it bounced over the rugged terrain. Over and over, fresh mud from the slushy dirt road splattered on the windshield. In the headlights, visions of shadowy pine trees rose out of the darkness, then vanished. She looked into the side mirror and saw a face. It was a pale face, chewing on her thumbnail like a woman possessed. Her own face.
Strange, she thought. Why do I look like that? I thought I was more tan from tennis club.
But then, how long had it been since she last went to practice? A week? A month? A year?
Never mind, she told herself. It doesn't matter. I'll never make it back. I wish he'd just kill me.
We're almost there, the middle-aged man at the wheel shouted. He wore a stiff coat over a military uniform. The mountains are a few kilometers from here. We're going to get you back to Japan.
Liar, she thought. You're lying. We can't shake them in a car like this. They're going to catch me, strip me naked, drug me, lock me back in that awful water tank, that deep, dark, empty place. They'll ask me all those bizarre questions over and over again. I'll beg and I'll scream, but they won't let me out. I'll do anything. Just let me out. I'll cry, but they won't hear me. Not even I will hear me. And little by little, I'll keep breaking down. My only fun will be biting my nails. That's the only thing I can do, after all. I'll become nobody, nobody whose only fun comes from chewing on nails. Nails are so good. It's best when they hurt, best when they bleed. Bleedy, bloody, melty nails, 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 snails, snails.
Stop it! The man slapped her hand away. The girl, who up until then had been silent, in a trance, at last began to speak in a quavering voice.
Let me bite them, or kill me. Let me bite, or kill, 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 kill.
She sounded like a broken cassette player. The man's face twisted in pity. He breathed out a curse for the men who had put her in this state. Disgusting! The cruelty of it! Bastards! The man jerked the wheel in anger. Just then he saw a flash of light behind him. It brushed over his speeding jeep and continued on past. He had enough time to think, that was a rocket. Then, deluged by a wall of roaring flames and hit by a hammer of a shockwave, he saw the whole world around him go red. The windshield shattered, raining glass down on the two of them. The jeep spun out of control and skidded sideways. It hit a bump in the road, catapulted into the air, and flipped end over end through the fire. The girl was thrown clear through the passenger side window. If she had breathed in to scream just then, the swirling flames around her would have burned her lungs. She would have died on the spot. Unfortunately, she had lost even the will to do that. Trailing smoke through the empty air, she plowed through the undergrowth, hit the muddy snow shoulders first, then rolled like a rag doll for 3 meters before finally coming to a stop. For a while she just lay there, a puppet with its strings cut. Then her muddled consciousness cleared. She lifted her heavy head high enough to make out the damaged jeep. It was upside down now, chassis bared to the night sky, back wheels spinning futilely. She tried to pick herself up, but she couldn't move her right shoulder. Maybe it was broken or dislocated. Strange how she couldn't feel any pain. She crawled her way to the remains of the jeep. She found the man, covered in blood, lying just beyond the crushed outer frame.
Take this,
came his words, eventually, barely audible and spoken from lips covered in red foam. With a trembling hand he held out a CD case.
Keep going south.
For some reason his eyes were filled with tears.
Hurry, run
he managed. And that was the end. His tear-stained eyes remained half open, his face locked in an expression of grief. She didn't know why he had been crying. Was it because he was in pain? Because he was afraid of dying? Or because...
Very slightly, her dulled instincts began to stir. She picked herself up on her shaky legs, took the CD case, and began to walk. She stepped with one mud and blood-caked bare foot, then the other. She had no idea which way was south, but she would keep going, just as he had told her, chewing on her brittle thumbnail, dragging her sluggish feet. She could hear a helicopter approaching. The sound of the rotors churned through the air. The shrill engine growled, and the air intake roared. The wind it kicked up made the forest around her rustle and hiss. She looked up and saw a gray attack helicopter rising from the pines. Its frame was pocked and worn like a gnarled old tree. She found it very ugly. "Halt!" came a warning through the helicopter speakers. "Stop, or we'll shoot!" But the girl didn't stop. She didn't even think. She just kept walking. The voice spoke again, this time a little muffled. "Where does she think she's going?" The autocannon in the helicopter's nose flashed with fire. The shell slammed into the ground to her right. A spray of mud hit her, and the girl pitched forward. "That's what you get for being a naughty little girl," the voice taunted. She tried to pick herself up with her still working arm. This time she felt a shockwave from her left. The force rolled her over to face the sky. She let out a feeble moan. "You'd better be careful," the voice warned. No, it's the same guy, never mind. Another shell, then another, burst the ground nearby. Battered about by the force of the impacts, the girl struggled, squirmed, and writhed in the freezing mud. She heard laughter from the speakers, as if a few of them were in there, mocking her. Struggling for breath, the girl continued to crawl forward. "Aw, poor little thing, all beat up and still trying to The voice froze up suddenly, leaving the only sounds the roar of the engine and the rotors booming out over the forest. After a moment, the voice from the helicopter spoke again, this time sharp and urgent. "It's an AS. I'm taking us high." That was as far as the pilot managed. A squeal of shredding metal and a spray of sparks had erupted from the attack helicopter. The girl looked up and saw something sticking out of its nose. It was a massive knife, a throwing knife as long as a person was tall. Its red-hot blade was buried deep in the machinery, sending sparks flying. The helicopter was out of control. It zigged and zagged wildly before, at last, its nose dipped, and it began to plummet toward the girl. She had neither the time nor the will to escape. She was rooted to the spot, watching as the lump of metal came to consume her vision. Just then, flying in from the corner of her eye, an enormous figure appeared. It strode over her, put itself in the helicopter's path, planted its feet, and spread its arms. The helicopter continued its fall. There was a collision. Shards flew, showering the ground around her. The ear-splitting grinding of gears sang a cacophony, together with the whirling of turbines. She looked up and saw the figure's upper torso holding the helicopter aloft by its crumpled front half. Its back was arched as it strained against the weight, and steam jettisoned from its arms, its back, all of its joints. Then, still clutching the helicopter in a death grip, the figure began to walk. Each step it took was a slushy stomp, displacing piles of muddy snow. Then, once it reached a safe distance from the girl, it hurled the helicopter into the forest. The craft's battered remains exploded as they hit the ground. Silhouetted by the rising flames, the figure, about 8 meters tall, turned to face her. It was humanoid, powerful without looking slow. It had long legs and a pinched waist, a broad chest, and powerful arms. Its armor plating had a roundish cast to it, and the head looked like a person in a fighter pilot's helmet. A gun, resembling the sort typically wielded by human soldiers, was strapped to its shoulders, and it wore a backpack clearly modeled after the human-sized kind. "Arm slave," the girl whispered. The massive machine, the arm slave, began to walk back toward her. "Are you hurt?" the humanoid weapon asked. The voice was measured and male. You were pretty close to the helicopter, so I used an ATD. My shot cannon would have been too powerful. When she failed to respond, the arm slave knelt down, placed a hand on the ground, and dipped its head. It felt like a scene from a fairy tale, the gray giant kneeling to the broken princess. With a sound of rushing pressure, the arm slave's torso split open. The girl watched, stunned, as a soldier appeared from the hatch behind the neck. The appearance of the arm slave's operator reminded her vaguely of a ninja. He was dressed in a black piloting suit and wore a light, compact headgear. He jumped down to her side, holding a first aid kit. He looked East Asian, and he was young. The boy soldier, she thought to call him. He seemed not much older than she was, but he had none of a teenager's air of immaturity or shiftlessness. Disheveled black hair, piercing eyes, a furrowed brow, and a mouth drawn in a tight frown. "Does it hurt anywhere?" he asked. She was a little surprised to hear him speaking Japanese. She said nothing. "You do speak Japanese, don't you?" he asked. Uncertainly, she nodded. "Are you with him?" she asked eventually. "Yes," the boy affirmed. "We're from Mithril." "Mithril?" "A secret military organization," he explained, "not affiliated with any country." She fell silent once more, and the boy soldier began patching her up. Waves of pain washed over her, and her breathing became ragged. She eventually spoke again, her shoulders jerking up and down from trembling. "He's dead." "It appears so," the boy soldier agreed. "He died trying to get me out." "That's the kind of man he was." "It doesn't make you sad?" she asked. The boy soldier fell into thoughtful silence, pausing in his work before he answered. "I don't know." He finished taping her shoulder and arm, then, without any reluctance, began to feel around her body, touching and prodding her. "What what are you going to do with me?" she asked quaveringly. "Take you with me." "Where?" "First, my AS will bring you to our transport helicopter's LZ. The helicopter will take us to our mothership, which is waiting out in the ocean. After that, I don't know," he told her honestly. "This is all our mission called for." "Our mission?" As if to answer her question, two more gray arm slaves pushed aside the trees to make their appearance. They looked almost identical to the first one. One was armed with a rifle, the other with a missile launcher, and both seemed to be on high alert. "No need to worry," he told her. "They're with me." Her consciousness began to grow hazy, and her field of vision narrowed. Her thoughts became sluggish, and she grew disoriented. "What's your name?" she managed to ask, as if begging. "You shouldn't talk," the pilot advised her. "Save your strength." "Tell me," she pleaded. The young soldier hesitated a moment. Sagara Sosuke," he said at last. She barely heard his words before she fell unconscious. 15 April, 1611 hours, Greenwich Mean Time. Amphibious assault submarine Tuatha De Danann, 100-meter depth, sea of Japan. Or is it Danan? I can't remember. It's the Danaan. I can't remember my Celtic. Sorry. The giant submarine's sprawling hangar was lined with rows of armed slaves, transport helicopters, and VTOL fighters. They made up most of the Tuatha De Danann's main arsenal. Sagara Sosuke, having finished his mission and written up his report, gazed at the AS currently under maintenance. In one hand he held a fruit-flavored calorie mate, in the other a checklist on a clipboard. "Hey, Sosuke!" a haughty voice called out to him. He turned and saw his comrade, Sergeant Kurtz Weber, approaching. Kurtz was a beautiful man with blond hair and blue eyes. He had a tapered jawline, almond eyes, and a slender nose. His long hair, well coiffed, lent him an appealing androgyny. No woman, no matter how modest, could see his smile on a first meeting without feeling her heart flutter. But that would be as far as it went, because... Hey, why the long face? Got constipation? Hemorrhoids? When Kurtz started speaking, it all fell apart. He was a man unburdened by things like dignity and good taste. I'm in perfectly good health, Sosuke responded neutrally as he chewed on his calorie mate. Ugh, you're such a pill. So what? They're taking it apart already? Kurtz asked, looking at the stripped AS. They wanted to run through a thorough inspection of the skeleton. Well, you gave it a hell of a workout. I can't believe you caught a helicopter. Weren't you scared? No, Sosuke told him. I knew it was within the limits of what the M9 is capable of. The AS used by Sosuke and Kurtz was the M9 Gernsback. It was a state-of-the-art model, not yet available to the rank and file. Its power and agility were an order of magnitude beyond that of any AS before it. Well, if you wanted to pull off a stunt like that, I guess you'd need this machine to do it. Kurtz sat himself down on an empty ammunition case and peered keenly at the dissected M9. The weapons known as arm slaves had their origins in the mid-1980s. The President of the United States at the time, Ronald Reagan, had pushed for this robot squad idea alongside his strategic defense initiative. The next star in the field of localized warfare. A bold technological leap forward. A reduction of the burden on our fighting men and women. Dressed up in such dubious rhetorical flourishes, and despite being initially laughed off as a fantasy, the humanoid weapons became reality in a mere 3 years. They could run at 100 kilometers per hour, handle a variety of weapons with ease, and pack firepower on par with a tank. Specialists in the field were stunned. Contemporary civilian robot technology had barely achieved bipedal movement. What genius, what group of brilliant minds, they wondered, could have possibly been responsible? But the answers were locked tight behind the word confidential. Occult researchers and UFO scholars, insisting it must come from alien technology, saw their books and magazines fly off the shelves. But it didn't last long. Humans soon began to see the ASs as just another piece of high-tech weaponry, no different from cruise missiles and stealth bombers. And so, 10 years passed. AS tech continued to evolve in leaps and bounds. Before long, these machines became so deadly that even attack helicopters had to approach with care. Casual reminder, this is written in the days before drones became de rigueur, and kind of have largely changed the face of warfare as we know it. Anyway, I'm here about that girl you picked up, Kurtz said, as if only just remembering. Did she pull through? Sosuke asked. Yeah, but they say she's in serious withdrawal. Narcotics? Cannabinoids, or something like. We don't know all the details yet. They pumped her full of them in a KGB lab. No idea what kind of experiments they were running, but they put her in one hell of a state. Will she recover? Who knows, Kurtz answered. It'll take a long time if she does, though. Sosuke fell silent. Their squad hadn't been told what kind of experiments the girl was being used for. Their commanding officers seemed to know, but they rarely shared that kind of info with the soldiers on the ground. The man who had saved her was a spy with Mithril's intelligence division. His mission, as conceived, had been a low-risk one, smuggle some information out of the KGB lab. But when he saw her being used as a guinea pig, he'd decided he couldn't just leave her there. He'd placed himself in the crosshairs to get her out. A chase had ensued, and he had died, leaving the CD and the nearly catatonic girl to Sosuke's rescue squad. As Sosuke and Kurtz fell into silence, Master Sergeant Melissa Mao entered the hangar. "Oh, there you are." She made a beeline for the two men. Mao was Chinese American, in her mid-20s, and, like Sosuke and Kurtz, qualified to operate an AS. The three of them were frequently put on missions together, with Mao acting as their team leader. She was a striking woman, with short black hair and a lively glint in her eyes. "I see you're working overtime," she said. Sosuke nodded silently in response. "What is it now, big sis?" Kurtz asked, his expression confrontational. "What's with that look?" she bristled. "You got a problem?" "Never said that." "Then loosen up already. You look like enough of a bozo as it is." Like a bozo? Me?" Kurtz spluttered. "I've done modeling for Esquire." Mao got up in his face, eyes wide. "Yeah, I saw that, with your big, stupid grin. I thought it was a poster for one of those war spoofs, like Charlie Sheen in Hot Shots." Kurtz growled. "You stupid bitch." Suddenly Mao reached out and seized Kurtz by the cheeks. "Hey, that's me!" he cried. "What was that? What did you call me?" she asked sweetly. "You what?" "Beautiful, serene, commanding Master Sergeant." "Better." I honestly don't know what he's saying there. It is spelled out as follows. Um, B-BEAUUUFIFUW, comma space, SRENNNERR, comma space, COMMHEHANT, M hyphen MASSSSERSARRGENNT, exclamation point. Um, Beautiful something competent master sergeant. Maybe it is serene. Senior? I don't know. I don't know what the Srenener is. I don't know. Anyway, better. Sosuke watched them sidelong while he finished off his calorie mate. Mao noticed it and asked him, "Was it good?" "Yes, it had just the right amount of sweetness." His face was as expressionless as ever, but there was a vague light of happiness in his eyes. "Oh, good to hear. Anyway, Sosuke, the Major wants to talk to you." "Understood." "You too, Kurtz." "Huh? But you said we could have a break." "Well, I take it back. I, on the other hand, will take a break. I'm going to take a shower and get to bed." Mao cackled as she walked away. "Stupid bitch. Someday I'm really gonna give it to her. I'll make her scratch my back until she begs for mercy." Kurtz flipped up the bird at Mao's departing form. Sosuke watched him and asked in confusion, "Is that some sort of magic ritual?" Sosuke and Kurtz knocked on the Major's door. The reply was immediate. "Come in." They did so. In the back of a room piled high with documents and bookshelves sat a large Caucasian man. He was absorbed in some reading material on his desk, and didn't even spare them a glance as they entered. He was a broad-shouldered man dressed in an olive-green uniform, and had an attractive face with strong features. His long gray hair was tied back in a tail, and he kept his mustache and beard clipped short. This was Major Andrei Kalinin, their commanding officer. "Reporting in," Sosuke declared, standing at attention. "Yeah, we made it," Kurtz acknowledged sullenly. Major Kalinin looked up from the documents he'd been reading, then flipped them over to hide their contents. He showed no sign of being bothered by Kurtz's attitude. "I have a mission for you," he said, cutting right to the chase. He took out another document pack and tossed it in front of the young men. "First, look through this." "Yes, sir." "Sure thing." They skimmed through the information. It seemed to be someone's personal history. There was a black and white picture attached of an East Asian girl of about 12 years old. She was smiling shyly, snuggled up to a woman who was probably her mother. She was fair-skinned and cute, with nicely proportioned features. Kurtz whistled. I'm not going to do that into the microphone. She'll be a heartbreaker someday.
That picture was taken 4 years ago. The girl is currently 16 years old.
Major Kalainen added. Oh, got a picture of that version?
No.
Sosuke showed no interest in their exchange and silently continued reading her history. First came her name, Chidori Kaname. She lived in Tokyo, Japan. Her father was a high commissioner with the UN. She had one sister, 11 years old, who lived with their father in New York. Her mother had passed 3 years ago, and Kaname herself was attending school in Tokyo. Past that came more detailed information: height, blood type, medical history, etc. Sosuke's eyes stopped on one particular row, where a key word had been sloppily blacked out with magic marker. It starts with W and ends in D. It is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 letters long. Potential 88%, according to Miller method. It seemed a rather perfunctory way to hide classified information, but perhaps that was a sign of how much he trusted them. So, something happened to her? Kurtz asked.
Something might.
Huh? Major Kalainen, I'm not sure if it's a long eye or a short eye. Major Kalinin sat back in his chair and gazed at the tabloid-sized map on the wall. It showed the world's current borders, the complicated territories of the Soviet Union, China divided into North and South, and the mess of dotted lines that made up the Middle East region.
All you need to know is that the girl in that picture, Chidori Kaname, is under high risk of kidnapping from the KGB and an unknown number of other organizations.
How come?
You don't need to know that, Major Kalainen said shortly.
I see. Kurtz sniffed. The point was, people might be coming for Chidori Kaname. Might. Sosuke didn't know why they wanted her, or what could have led to it. The situation was completely opaque. So, what's our mission? He asked.
We're going to need you to keep her safe. I know Sergeant Sagara can speak Japanese, and I think you can too, Sergeant Weber.
Actually, it might be Weber. Because it's a... yeah, whatever. Well, sure, but... Kurtz's father had been a special correspondent with a newspaper, and he'd lived in Edogawa, Tokyo until he was 14, so he could speak Japanese well enough.
I've already briefed Sergeant Mao, Major Kalainen told them. It'll be up to the three of you.
Just the three of us? Sosuke asked.
We can't spare any more. It's already been decided.
It's not going to be easy, Kurtz observed.
That's why we're sending you.
Major Kalainen answered. Sosuke, Kurtz, and Mao weren't merely AS operators, they were soldiers trained in a variety of skills, including parachuting and recon. They were part of an elite team hand-picked from a large pool of candidates. To them, ASs were just another kind of weapon, no different from a gun or a vehicle.
And, because Sergeant Mao insisted, your equipment will be Class B.
Kurtz and Sosuke both stared in disbelief. Class B equipment. He was telling them to take an arms slave. In the middle of a city? Kurtz questioned.
Use the ECS in invisibility mode, Major Kalainen recommended, and you'll be fine.
Most modern-day weapons, including the arms slaves, came equipped with an ECS, an electromagnetic camouflage system. It was a cutting-edge stealth device that used hologram technology to hide the user completely from radar and infrared sensors. The ECS employed by Mithril were even more advanced, capable of nullifying wavelengths on the visible spectrum, in effect, rendering you invisible. This consumed a lot of energy, of course, so it was unrealistic to use once maneuvers began, but for staying stationary and hiding, it was nearly flawless.
You'll get one M9, Kalainen added. Take minimal armaments and 2 packs of external capacitors.
Sir.
Also, this mission must be conducted in utmost secret. We'll have a mess on our hands if the Japanese government learns about it. Therefore, you must monitor Kaname and protect her if it comes to it, without her awareness.
Kurtz's attractive face grimaced. The hell? That's ridiculous. It will be difficult, Sosuke agreed. The idea of protecting someone without their knowledge or consent seemed absurd. But Major Kalainen remained unfazed. We have a way to make it easier. This girl, Chidori Kaname, attends a co-ed public high school, where she spends most of her day. Thus, we'll install our youngest squad member there. He's the same age as her, and he's Japanese. Oh, I get it. Kurtz clapped his hands in realization. He and the Major both turned to gaze at Sosuke. Sosuke stood there silently at first, perplexed by their attention. Major, he finally asked, are you suggesting... Major Kalainen signed the directive as he responded. First, we need to manufacture some documentation. We'll have to find out what the school requires. What the school requires for what? Sagara Sosuke asked with trepidation, though he already knew the answer. What else? Major Kalainen replied. A transfer student application. 16 April, 1150 hours, Greenwich Mean Time. First briefing room, Tuatha De Danann, 100-meter depth, near Tsugaru Peninsula. Sosuke glared sullenly into the camera. Big smile, Sosuke, Kurtz cooed, beckoning. He was serving as an impromptu photographer. Sosuke made an awkward attempt to twist his face into a smile. It ended up looking more like a muscle spasm. There we go, Kurtz said encouragingly. You want to look nice and friendly on your ID, right? As he snapped the picture, Sosuke immediately reverted to his blank expression. Kurtz sighed. 16 April, 2120 hours, Greenwich Mean Time. Dining hall, Tuatha De Danann, 80-meter depth, near Kinkasan. Sosuke furrowed his brow as he surveyed the items scattered across the table. What is all of this? Moose and a brush, a portable CD player, CDs by Enka singer Itsuki Hiroshi, and pop icon SMAP, an amulet from Mount Narita, Roto pharmaceutical eye drops, a coupon to Tower Records, a Nintendo Game Boy, a Mr. Junko brand watch, a Junker Cote health tonic, packs of Marlboro and Libera cigarettes, magazines like Popeye, Josei Jishin, and Dragon Magazine, etc., etc., etc. We rounded up everything on board that a Japanese high school student might have, Melissa Mao explained proudly. I see, he said, then paused. What's this? It was a small ring of rubber in a square plastic wrapper. That's a condom, Melissa grinned. I know that, Sosuke told her, but what use would a high school student have for a condom? Don't play dumb, you perv, she teased. What are you talking about? He asked with perfect sincerity. I've used them several times before. They're meant for use in the jungle, to replace a lost canteen. Mao stared and said nothing. They can hold a liter of fresh water, Sosuke added. Oh, really? Mao sighed. 18 April, 1006 hours, Greenwich Mean Time. First briefing room, Tuatha De Danann, 50-meter depth, near Boso Peninsula. Here, have a look at this. Kurtz pushed Sosuke to the LCD screen, remote for the tape deck in hand. This is how Japanese high school students act. Burn it into your brain, okay? It was footage of a classroom. It seemed to be around sunset, and there were only 2 students present, one male, one female. Though the classroom was large, they had holed up together in a corner, exchanging nervous conversation. Hey, listen, I used to think of you as a childhood friend, but... The boy stuttered out, while the girl remained silent. But I've finally realized how I really feel. I... Toru-kun! She cried out. The 2 of them embraced. Just then there was a sound. They gasped and turned. Another girl stood in the door to the classroom. She was watching them and trembling. Naomi! The boy cried. You're awful, the second girl whispered, and then ran away, crying. The boy looked about to follow her, but the girl he was sitting with stopped him, and well? Kurtz asked, prompting Sosuke for his opinion. Sosuke's expression was one of ardent confusion. I don't understand. Why did the second girl flee the scene? Flee the scene? You stupid. No. I see now. She had learned their secret. She was afraid of being silenced, so she fled the scene. A wise woman. She'll live a long time. Kurtz sighed. 19 April, 0330 hours, Japan Standard Time. Flight deck, Tuatha De Danann, ocean surface near Miura Peninsula. I don't know why that gave me trouble. The noise of the engine roared. The De Danann had surfaced and exposed its flight deck. The black vessel's maw stood open to the sky above, allowing ASs, combat helicopters, and VTOLs to take off from within. On the deck, a 7-blade transport helicopter stood by for takeoff. Its storage complement was loaded up with an M9 arm slave and its equipment. Sosuke tossed his bags behind his seat, then fastened his seatbelt. He pulled his forged certificate of residence from his inner pocket and double-checked the information. From beside him, Mao peered at his documentation. You're using your real name? She asked him suspiciously. It's not as if I'm registered in that country anyway, Sosuke explained. You can always change the name of someone who doesn't exist. Well, I suppose. Not an issue. Take us out. The helicopter began its smooth ride toward their takeoff point. Are you sure you can handle this, though? You're kind of a dunce about social stuff, Kurtz asked from the seat behind him. I'll do my best. Tessa was worried, you know, Mao added. Tessa was the captain of the Tuatha De Danann. That's understandable, Sosuke agreed. It's an important mission. That's not what I meant. Just then, the pilot in the bulky helmet said, We're taking off. April 0820 hours, Japan Standard Time. Tokyo suburbs, 100 meters north of Jindai High School. Ugh, it sucked, Chidori Kaname whispered in disgust. Her dark brown eyes searched vacantly for something in the blue sky above. The black hair that hung down her back swayed limply with each step she took. She repeated, Ugh, it just sucked. It was Monday, and she was part of a crowd of students on their way to school. Tokiwa Kyoko, the classmate who was walking beside her, chimed in. This again? You've been moaning all morning, Kana-chan. Was he really that bad? I mean, he just kept going on and on about nothing. They were talking about a boy she had gone on a date with yesterday. I agreed to go out with the guy. Couldn't he have put together a conversation with a little more depth? Who cares if your dad's a designer or you have a friend who's a J-leaguer? Who cares? What about you? She had ended up thinking. Fair enough, her classmate agreed, deciding it was too much trouble to do otherwise. Whoops. Nope, I did get the paper used is very thin, so I'm probably going to skip pages at some point. The life of Zhuge Liang, pollution in the West Pacific, religious strife in the Middle East. Fair enough. You can't fair enough your way out of this, Kyoko, Kaname objected. You're the one who introduced us. Well, he asked me to. So, if someone asked you to auction me off in Macau, would you do that too? Fair enough. Kaname groaned. You're such a bitch. Huh? She had noticed a line of students out the front gate. Oh, God, a bag check. Her mood sank. The non-curricular guidance teachers were checking the pockets and bags of every student heading into the building. Hey, it is! Wait, Kana-chan, you're not just carrying anything dangerous, are you? Well, not dangerous, but the problem was that her bag was full of strange books, like Murphy's Laws of Success, History Edition, You Can Live Like Zhuge Liang, and So Long and Thanks for All the Fish, and Miracles of Archaeology, Did the Moai Write the Dead Sea Scrolls, and such. She had borrowed them from another friend, and she was bringing them in to return them. So what's the big deal? If you had a machine gun or a bomb, that might be a reason to freak. What kind of a weirdo would bring in something like that? She laughed, then paused. Hmm? Beyond the gate, at the head of the line, a crowd had formed. She could hear the sounds of an argument. What's all that all about? What's all that about? In the spirit of curiosity, Kaname and Kyoko approached and peered through the crowd to see what was going on. Their homeroom teacher, Kagurazaka Eri, was apparently grilling a student. You think we'll tolerate this kind of attitude your first day here? No, You're not going inside until you show me your bag. But it was a boy. He seemed to be trying hard to stay cool, but couldn't completely hide his distress. His eyes darted all around, suggesting unease with the attention he was getting. Who's that? Kaname whispered. I've never seen him before. He was wearing the same high-collared uniform as the other boys, but there was something strange about him. He was handsome enough, but Kaname's real first impression of him was grim. He had disheveled black hair, his mouth was in a tight frown, with the air of someone on constant alert. He seemed skinny at a glance, but he carried himself like a practitioner of judo or some other rough sport. Show it to me, now! The teacher grabbed the student's hand and snatched his bag away. Don't tell me. You've got cigarettes, don't you? She opened the bag and rummaged around inside. She pushed aside textbooks and notebooks, and at the very bottom she found an Austrian machine pistol with three 34-round magazines. There was also a cylinder of plastic explosives with a detonator, a stun grenade, a miniature camera, piano wire. This has to be a joke. What? The boy looked distraught. You can't bring toys like these to school. I'm confiscating them. He blinked. What? Go on, wait for me in the office, the teacher ordered. It's almost time for homeroom. The student just stared at her. The onlookers dispersed, laughing. Kaname mustered her most disgusted tones to say, Ugh, a military geek. Gag me. Kyoko laughed. I don't know. He seems hilarious to me. Kyoko's prediction would turn out to be right. Sagara Sosuke had grown up on battlefields. He had traveled all over the world. But, tragically, here in this microcosm known as high school, he was an idiot out of his element. I can't believe they searched our belongings, Sosuke thought as he followed Ms. Kagurazaka down the quiet hallway. His first thought, when the non-curricular guidance teacher first asked him to show her his bag, was, Have I failed in my mission already? His second thought, after his weapons were discovered and confiscated, was, I suppose now they'll take me to the basement for interrogation. He was unaware that most schools didn't have basement interrogation rooms. But, as it turned out, that kind of inspection was an everyday occurrence at this school. Does that mean students regularly try to smuggle in guns and explosives? Sosuke wondered. It's hard to imagine, but if students regularly brought firearms to school, it would make his bodyguard duties that much harder. A passing member of the volleyball club could whip out a submachine gun and start firing at any moment. Then again, Kurtz Weber had the M9 Gernsback waiting in the copse behind the school. Sosuke had a miniature transceiver disguised as a watch. One call and backup would be there in 10 seconds. Uru 6, what's your status? He whispered to his comrade through the transceiver. Hungry. Want booze. Kurtz replied into Sosuke's earpiece, or only morning, yet already brimming with complaints. But I suppose my infiltration was successful at least, Sosuke consoled himself. Kagurazaka Eri, the teacher leading him down the hall, was in her mid-twenties. Her hair was done in a short bob, and she wore a trim gray skirt suit. "Ma'am?" he asked eventually. "Yeah?" "That gun you confiscated." "Oh, you'll get it back at the end of the term," Eri responded with a slightly teasing air. "No, it's not that. I wanted to warn you. There's a shot loaded in the chamber. You need to not touch the trigger under any circumstances." "Oh, really?" She deadpanned. "It's an extremely lethal splat bullet," he told her seriously. "An accidental discharge would be fatal. Please." "I get it," Eri sighed. "Calm down." "You don't get it, and I can't calm down," Sosuke thought. But he just shook his head in silence. When Kaname and Kyoko saw Eri lead Sagara Sosuke into the room, they flew into a conversation of silent gestures. "Hey, it's him! The firearm geek!" The students buzzed, and the teacher raised her voice over the din. "Okay, quiet down. It's time to meet your new classmate." She slapped the blackboard with the attendance roll, sending the students of Class 2-4 into temporary attention mode. "All right, Sagara-kun, introduce yourself." "Right." Sosuke took a step forward and struck an at-ease posture, chest out, shoulders back. "I am Sergeant Sagara Sosuke," he announced in a clear, resonant voice. Then he realized his mistake, and his face went pale. "Sergeant Sagara Sosuke? I think it's one long title like Hashiba Chikuzen no Kami Hideyoshi." "Sergeant? Like a drill sergeant? The army trainer guys?" Nobody seemed to take the statement very seriously. "Quiet!" Eri barked. "He's not done yet. And Sagara-kun, stop fooling around. I'm sorry." He'd never felt this kind of nervousness before. One careless word could condemn his mission to failure. The very thought of it brought beads of sweat to his forehead. "Sagara Sosuke, that is who I am. Please forget the sergeant part. That is all." Then he fell silent. After a pause, Eri asked, "Is that it?" "Yes, that's it." She turned back to the students. "Any questions?" "Me! Hey, Sagara-kun, where do you come from?" one student asked. "Many places," he answered. "Afghanistan, Lebanon, Cambodia, Iraq. I've never stayed in one place for very long." A hush fell over the class, and Eri spoke up to fill the awkward silence. "What Sagara-kun is saying is, he's lived overseas for most of his life. You were in the United States until recently, weren't you?" "That's right," Sosuke confirmed. She had likely read his transfer form, which listed his prior residence as Fayetteville, North Carolina, USA. It was untrue, of course. He had chosen that location because he knew someone who lived near there, which would make it easier to keep his story straight. Before Sosuke, another student raised a hand. "What are your hobbies?" Before Sosuke could respond, someone else interrupted. "Model guns, right?" which caused the room to break out in laughter. "No," Sosuke corrected. "Fishing and reading." That part was true. He typically spent his free time at Mithril's West Pacific base, fishing while reading munitions manuals. If it was raining, he'd bring an umbrella and lock himself up in his own little world. Put bluntly, he was a loner. "What kind of books do you read?" someone in the back asked. This time, Sosuke's eyes lit up. "Mostly technical manuals and trade magazines. I frequently read Jane's Fighting Ships, and I enjoy Soldier of Fortune, as well as Arm Slave Monthly from Harris Publishing." He paused to think for a moment. Oh, and I've read the Japanese publication AS Fan. I'm impressed by the level of information they get access to. It's a good magazine. These days, I've been more interested in maritime matters, though. I recently acquired the latest 10 publications from the Naval Institute Press. Silence. Sosuke trailed off and looked down at his fingernails. Forget all that, he said at last. But nobody even remembered it. Another girl raised her hand. Do you have a favorite musician? This was a hard one. Sosuke hardly ever listened to music. Then he suddenly recalled the CDs that Master Sergeant Mao had gathered up on the submarine before they deployed. And so he proclaimed with confidence, Itsuki Hiroshi and SMAP. Oh, I need to do a image change, I think. Yes, I do.
We're at the halfway point. Sorry. Because we're plowing through fairly quickly. There we go. 20 April, 1508 hours, Japan Standard Time. Second floor, Athletics Club building, Jindai High School, Tokyo. He's a total freak, I'm telling you, Kaname stressed to Kyoko as she undid the ribbon on her chest. Have you heard him say one thing that's in tune with reality? There's no way he's doing it to be funny either. He's just one card short of a full deck, right? First-rate crazy? She talked and talked. While she did, she unbuttoned her blouse, removed it, and reached out to arrange it on its hanger. But the sleeve got caught and knocked over the Mizuno bat she had leaned against the locker. Oh, for the love of... she grumbled, but then went back to her rant. And did you see the way he kept looking around all during class? And at lunch break, how he kept going back and forth from the hall? Kyoko was next to her, undoing the hooks on her skirt. Oh, did he do that? Yeah, he did. Ugh, I hate watching nervous types like him. It so gets on my nerves. Then don't watch him, maybe? I wasn't, Kaname stammered. Like I'd ever be watching that geek. But as she adjusted her bra, she went right back to it. Also, I made eye contact a couple times. He was totally watching me. Who was? Kyoko questioned. That guy, duh. Then he'd look away like, oh, I wasn't really looking at you. But come on, it was so obvious. Ugh, it's so creepy. Well, you're pretty attractive, Kana-chan, Kyoko whispered with the smallest hint of jealousy. She put on her stirrup socks and reached for her orange pants. Well, thanks, but that's beside the point. Those eyes were the eyes of a total sicko. You know, Kana, you've been spending a whole lot of time discussing Sagara. I have? At that exact moment, Sosuke was striding across the athletic field. He stopped in front of the sports club's building, looking up at the line of 6 second-floor windows. There should be a staircase. Yes, there it was. He checked the paper he was holding one more time, then started to climb. You have, Kyoko affirmed, back in the club room. She knew her friend all too well. Kaname was a loudmouth, but that was actually something people liked about her. Her no-holds-barred attitude was a large part of why last year she'd been dragged, reluctantly, into the student council vice presidency. She also had a fundamentally people-pleasing nature, which was why she was here now, helping out Kyoko's team. It was odd to see her complain this much about someone she barely knew, and odder still for her to badmouth him behind his back. Are you that into him? Kyoko asked. Oh, what? No way! Kaname denied. Kyoko knew what that ha meant too. That was her way of saying, I don't know, but this conversation is over, even if Kaname didn't realize that herself. Okay, let's go. With their uniforms on, Kaname and Kyoko headed for the door, but as they swept open the curtain that cordoned off the changing area, there were 2 sharp knocks, followed immediately by the club door opening wide. The boy who had opened the door, Sosuke, locked eyes with a girl in the middle of changing. Eh! The girls present, 18 or so in total,
all sucked in a deep breath, and then... Just pretend I'm screaming shrilly at the top of my lungs. Yeah! Their scream was loud enough to shake the windows. Sosuke stood there, first confused, then alarmed. He was probably more surprised than they were. The first thing he did was clear his mind of the information most of these girls are in their underwear, a trivial factor during an emergency. Then he dove into the room, grabbing Kaname's collar and pulling her to the ground as he passed. In one fluid motion, he yanked the revolver from his ankle holster, shouted, "Everyone, get down! Get down!" and rolled onto his back with his gun aimed at the door. It had taken less than 2 seconds in all. His reaction speed was remarkable, honed by years of practice. Sosuke remained just as he was, senses on full alert. Then, after a moment, he switched to confusion. There was no one in the doorway. No one at all. Kaname still on the floor under his back, his gun still pointed at the door. He looked around and around, growing more and more puzzled. There was no sign of threat anywhere in the room. Correction. He was surrounded by girls with murder in their eyes. 10 minutes later, the chaos in the clubroom had finally subsided. "You had another one of these on you, huh?" Kagurazaka Eri, who had been notified by one of the girls, snorted as she picked up his .38 5-shot revolver. "Yes," Sosuke said. Then he added after a moment, "I'm very sorry." He shrank into the folding chair they'd sat him in, looking completely run down. His uniform collar was torn, and he could see traces of scratches forming on his flesh here and there. His hands were cuffed behind him, holding him in place. They had used the very aluminum alloy handcuffs Sosuke had brought with him. It was like a prisoner interrogation. "I'll be confiscating this, too," Eri told him. "I'm sure you won't object." "Right. But what?" "At least remove the bullets," he pleaded. "They're hollow points. Extremely dangerous." "Yes, I'm sure they are," Eri said dismissively. Then she stood up and declared, "Chidori-san, he's all yours." "Huh? But I have a teachers' conference to get to. There's a field trip coming up, remember? He's unequivocally in the wrong here, so talk it over with the others and deal with him as you see fit." Whether from her trust in Kaname or a basic lack of giving a damn, Eri turned authority over to the girls and stepped out. Sosuke, facing an uncertain future, viewed Eri's exit like the UN peacekeepers' departure from Cambodia. Which is... Uh, that's an image. This isn't going to end well at all. All right. Kaname, Kyoko, and the other girls all glared down at Sosuke. Anticipating the torture in store for him, he timidly said, "The Geneva Convention specifies..." "The what?" "Nothing." Kaname had never heard those words before. She actually thought Geneva was the capital of Brazil. "All right, Sagara-kun, let's go right to it." "What were you thinking?" Kaname hissed. "The peeping Tom stuff is bad enough, but what about that whole scene? You pulled out that model gun, you threw me around the room. You don't think that's crazy? Like the first-rate kind?" "First-rate?" he stammered. "Crazy, but first-rate? What kind of contradiction is that? Is it I who am mad, or the world? No, wait, what was it that I did that was crazy? Crazy is normal. Normal is..." Abridged. Such pointless philosophical agonies turned over and over in Sosuke's mind in an instant that felt like eternity. "First rate, you know? First rate crazy?" Kaname pointed an index finger to her temple and moved it in a looping gesture. Then she yanked up her sleeve. "Look at my elbow! You broke the skin! What are you going to do about that, huh?" There was a very slight red spot on her porcelain arm. You'd barely notice it if it wasn't pointed out. The harm they'd caused Sosuke was far more severe, but none of them seemed to care about that. "It should heal quickly enough," he said foolishly. Immediately the girls pounced on him. "How dare you! A scar can haunt a woman all her life. I can't believe what a jerk you are!" He felt bombarded from all sides. It was worse than a crossfire between tank battalions. "Well, say something already! Tell Kana-chan you're sorry!" After a struggle, he managed to put together that they had found his behavior unacceptable. So, at last, in the name of good faith, he said, "I apologize for being overly rough with you. I wasn't trying to harm you or your friends." "Then what were you trying to do?" "I can't tell you. You don't have appropriate clearance." And like that, the good faith was down the drain. "Huh? What clearance? Tell us!" "I can't. I'm sorry." Kaname mussed up her hair with her hands. "Why did you even come here in the first place?" "I wanted to join the club," Sosuke said evenly. In perfect unison, the girls responded, "Huh?" "I was in this same club at my last high school. I believe the team found me very useful, so I wanted to join your club as well. I'm quite athletic, and I believe I could be an asset to you. Will you let me join?" Confidently, he recited the lines he'd memorized in advance. He thought it was a pretty good performance, all in all. "Sagara-kun," Kaname intoned, as if fighting off a pounding headache, "this is the girls' softball club." Sosuke furrowed his brow. "Boys aren't allowed to join, then?" "Of course not!" she shrieked. He thought for a minute. Then, at last, he spoke. "Isn't sexual discrimination a serious issue in these cases?" "What cases?" The girls cast Sosuke out of the room, chair and all, and sent him flying down the stairs. April 20, 1845 hours, Japan Standard Time. Room 505, Tiger's apartment complex, Chofu, Tokyo. The viewfinder followed a girl with black hair as she opened a door, went inside, and shut it behind her. The highly directional microphone picked up the sound of a lock clacking into place. 1845 hours. Angel arrives home. No sign of pursuit. Melissa Mao, who was stationed to watch Chidori Kaname's home, reported into a nearby microphone. A portable display tracked the location of Kurtz's AS on a map. The M9, invisible thanks to its ECS, was heading south along the city roads. He'd probably be in the neighborhood within 2 or 3 minutes. Melissa was in an apartment thrown together by Mithril's intelligence division, a safe house for staging and surveillance. It was positioned across the street from the apartment complex where Kaname lived, at an angle where they could look down on it. It was a large apartment with no real furniture except for 4 chairs and a cheap table she'd brought in that morning. Its only other occupants were a few firearms and a small mountain of surveillance equipment. "Why is everything in Tokyo so expensive, though?" she mused to herself. Having finished her 320 yen hamburger, she pulled out a 240 yen pack of menthols and lit up. "Those are too expensive? Man, the economy was great back then in that alternate history." You'll notice the reference to the Soviet Union. We'll have explanations for some of this stuff later. Um, it goes above and beyond Ronald Reagan being like, wouldn't it be a great idea if we had giant robots as part of our military armed forces? It goes beyond that. I promise. Sosuke returned shortly, and Mao was dumbstruck by the state he was in. He was handcuffed to a folding chair, which he was dragging along behind him. "What the hell is that?" she demanded. "It's a folding chair, obviously," he said as he managed, with great effort, to remove his shoes. "Well, sure, but why are you dragging it along with you?" "Because I can't remove the handcuffs," he admitted. "They're hinged, and the keyhole is facing away from my hands, so—" "Sosuke, come on," Mao groaned, and used her own master key to remove his restraints. "Thank you," he said. He then proceeded to explain the day's events. And that's that, he finished. The hardest part was buying the train ticket at Sengawa Station. He paused as he noticed her reaction. Is something wrong, Mao? Mao was clutching her head in her hands. Nothing, just a headache. I see. Maybe you should get some rest. There was a soft electronic beeping sound, a call from Kurtz. Oro 6 here. I just made it back. Would one of you please swap with me? He sounded like he was restraining a scream. Kurtz had just parked his M9 in a large trailer in the parking lot, a camouflaged hangar. Kurtz, did anyone notice you? I almost kicked an old man, Kurtz admitted. His dog barked its damn head off at me. A K truck nearly plowed into me. I came this close to smashing into a pachinko parlor, and I rested a hand on the wall of a cram school, and it cracked the freaking glass. Scared the shit out of the kids inside. After all, the people around him couldn't see the M9. To make matters worse, he'd had to navigate an urban area full of narrow streets. A lesser pilot than Kurtz might have caused a serious accident. Maybe we need to rethink our plan, said thoughtfully. Mao thought saidfully, I guess. I don't know what my brain was doing there. Mao said thoughtfully. Round-the-clock surveillance might not be possible, Sosuke suggested. We could leave the AS here during the day instead. I'd hate to lose the firepower and the sensors, though. Mao folded her arms in thought. The M9 was a cutting-edge AS, mounted with a billion-yen Vetronics. Vetronics? Wonder what that is. Mounted with billion-yen Vetronics. These were so sensitive they could even pick red flag phrases like grab her and use of force approved from nearby conversations and radio transmissions. On top of that, the machine had two heavy machine guns mounted on its head that could sweep through 20 or 30 unarmored enemies at once. It was a bit excessive for a mission of this scale, but then Mao came from the U.S. Armed Forces, who were the world leaders in excessive. I think I'd like to keep the M9 close to Kaname as much as possible, she decided. If we avoid rush hours and move along the river, yeah, I think we can work it out. If that's your decision, I respect it, Sosuke said, honoring his team leader's opinion. Whatever, just swap with me already. I'm exhausted, Kurtz whined over the radio. Hold your horses, Mao said, then changed focus. Oh, Kaname's getting a call. She fooled with the switches on the monitoring equipment, then offered Sosuke a headset. Want to hear, Sosuke? I suppose I should, he said, taking the headset. The call seemed to be from her little sister, who was living on the east coast of the USA. They joked around a little, and Kaname filled her in on how things were going in Japan. Eventually, she brought up the transfer student whom she referred to wryly as hilarious. Then, at last, with obvious reluctance, she hung up. What a sad story, Mao said wistfully as she flicked off the listening device. A beautiful girl, living all by herself, gets a pick-me-up once a day from her family thousands of miles away. With a thoughtful expression on his face, Sosuke offered the most cloddish interpretation possible. I'm not sure that I follow, but I agree that routine contact is a wise practice. Then he thought again and said, She seemed different just then from when I met her this afternoon. She was much less harsh and combative. Of course she was, Mao told him. She was talking to her sister. Is that how it works? Yep, that's how it works. Sosuke said thoughtfully. Also, I'm surprised that she doesn't seem to hate me. I guess she doesn't. Mao peered at him closer. You seem pleased about that. Sosuke turned to a window and examined his reflection. Do I? April 11:30 hours, Greenwich Mean Time. Amphibious assault submarine Tuatha De Danann, 50-meter depth, Pacific Ocean. It sounds like he's having a hard time, the girl in the captain's seat mused. The control room was the brain of the De Danann. It was about the size of a lecture hall. From within, the submarine was monitored and orders were doled out.
I think it will be a good experience for him,
Major Kalinin said from his place beside her. The girl was holding the report recently submitted by Melissa Mao. It ran down, in purely businesslike terms, the details of Sagara Sosuke's hectic day. A good experience? She asked. Even though, quote, his firearms were confiscated, unquote, he was, quote, assaulted by the protectee and several civilians, unquote, and he, quote, returned to the safe house in a state of significant impairment, unquote.
all within allowable range, Colonel.
The girl whom Kalinin referred to as Oh, that was a no? Oh, no, I don't know how to read. The girl whom Kalinin referred to as Colonel looked no older than her mid-teens. She had large gray eyes and carefully braided ash blonde hair that hung over her left shoulder. Rather than a uniform, she wore a simple pale brown skirt suit that was just a bit too large on her. The cuffs partly obscured her hands. Nevertheless, she had a colonel rank insignia gleaming on her collar. Normally, someone of her position would also have a ribbon bar displaying her accomplishments, but on her there was none to be seen. This was Talitha Testarossa, and though only a select few knew how she had acquired this title, she was the captain of the Tuatha De Danann. Well, I suppose it's all right, she responded at length. Mao-san and Weber-san are with him, and Sagara-san is at the top of his class at dealing with trouble if any occurs. Talitha Testarossa, Tessa for short, gazed at the large screen that made up the control room's front wall. The time and date, in both Japan Standard and Greenwich, were displayed at the edge of the screen. So, Major, how long do you think we'll need to keep them in Tokyo?
A few weeks, Colonel, until we can cut the problem off at the root.
Despite the girl's youth, Kalinin answered her with complete sincerity. Tessa turned her eyes to the nautical map on the screen. Then it will be up to us here. If all goes smoothly, Chidori Kaname will no longer need protection.
Yes, ma'am, and not just Chidori. All potential Whispered will be safe.
For now, you mean?
Indeed, regrettably.
Major Kalinin saluted Tessa, and then took his leave. Same time frame, outskirts of Khabarovsk, Soviet Union. A bridge spanned a frozen river. There was no traffic there, only two vehicles stopped nearby. The freezing silence of a Russian night hung heavy over the scene. Three men stood at the center of the bridge. One was an East Asian man dressed in an Italian coat. Two were Russians in KGB officers' uniforms. They bore ranks of colonel and captain. I feel a chill, the East Asian man whispered. He had moose-slicked hair that he was constantly adjusting. There was a large vertical scar on his forehead, put there by a knife, or perhaps even a bullet. It conjured the image of a third eye, tightly shut.
You're the one who chose to meet here. Don't complain,
Said the colonel with the copious jawline. That's not what I meant. I meant your foolish conduct sends chills up my spine.
What was that? What was that?
The captain, a large burly man, tried to step forward, but the colonel held him back. The East Asian man laughed. That's right. You know better than that, don't you, Colonel? The colonel snorted.
We're not here to talk about our mistakes. Our test Whispered was stolen, and there's a good chance that the candidate list was stolen as well. We can't continue our research without a test subject.
The colonel's voice seethed with irritation. He'd been conducting his research without notifying the party leaders. If his failure were to be made known, he'd be sent to an internment camp for sure.
So I will ask you, Gowron, have you identified who's behind it?
I'd say so. Have a look. The East Asian man, Gowron, handed a photograph to the colonel. I ran one of the photos you gave me through an image processor. I think you'll find the result extremely interesting. It was a faint outline of an arm slave, taken from behind. The image was blurry thanks to the ECS, which caused it to partially blend in with the background. It was running up the side of a mountain with a VIP transport backpack on. It looked Whoops. Did I? Yes, I did get that right. Awkward page transition. It looked slender and nimble, with proportions that were close to a human's. The colonel's brow furrowed.
What's this? I've never seen this model before.
That's a mithril AS. It's probably too much for you lot to handle, Gowron said with amusement.
Mithril?
A secret mercenary squad with weaponry about 10 years beyond that of the rest of the world. They hire only the best, and they're highly elusive. You haven't heard the rumors?
Only the name.
Mithril, a special forces team that worked in the shadows of international disputes. They'd strike the strongholds of armed guerrillas, destroy narcotics factories. One minute they were wiping out a terrorist training camp, the next they were blocking a black market nuclear weapons trade. To serve as firefighters for regional strife, independent of superpowers like the USA and the USSR, that was the purpose of Mithril.
Why would that band of do-gooders care about my plans?
The colonel asked with a slightly persecuted air. Because they're dangerous, Gowron told him. Your success could upset the power balance of the entire world.
Will this make it harder to capture another one?
For their plan to succeed, they needed that girl. That whispered. With their sample stolen away, they would now need to find another candidate. I can get you one. Now, kidnapping is harder than killing, and it's going to require a lot of effort. The colonel glared at Gowron.
Fishing for a better fee?
I am a businessman, after all, not a communist.
Don't make me laugh, you yellow ape!
The captain, silent up until now, suddenly roared.
We have countless other operators we could hire. Be grateful to the colonel for his generosity in choosing you.
But I am. He's a valued customer.
Oh, please, you Chinese are all untrustworthy.
Gowron hummed skeptically. I'm not Chinese.
You're close enough, but a drop of but a drop into the coal mines of Ural will blacken that grilling yet. Frickadoodle.
Quick casual reminder that the views of the racist fictional Soviets do not necessarily hold the views and beliefs of the author or the narrator.
You're close enough, but a drop into the coal mines of Ural will blacken that grinning yellow face of yours, you snobbish little.
You're getting on my nerves. Gowron pulled an automatic pistol from his coat. The motion was so casual that the two Russians barely noticed. It looked like he was just pulling out a cell phone, but it was, in fact, a gun. The red dot from a laser sight fixed itself on the captain's forehead, and then the gunshot echoed over the midnight riverside. Brain matter, blood, and bits of skull splattered across the snow. The captain's body fell limply to the ground, absent the top half of its head. That's better. Now let's see. I think we were discussing a kidnapping. He watched the speechless colonel sidelong as he put his gun away. Then he began rooting through his files as if nothing had happened. Here we are. What's the matter, Colonel?
That was my subordinate. How could you?
You mean that muscle-bound accessory you keep around to make threats? You really should have left him at home. You look foolish enough already. As expected, he didn't seem to feel any guilt about the murder. But he didn't seem to take any pleasure or pride in it either. He had the air of a man hassled for smoking in a non-smoking area. Now, let's talk business. The colonel said nothing. Gowron pulled out a few documents. There were about 15 packs in all, each with a photo attached. Boys and girls, all in their late teens, a variety of nationalities and races. Now, who to abduct? Just kidding. I've already decided. It's this girl. Cute, isn't she? Gowron showed the file and photo to the colonel. At the top were the words Chidori Kaname. Chidori Kaname. That was the name of this terrorist's next victim. Alrighty, let me see. Oh yeah, we can get the next chapter in. What time is it? Wow, that's actually kind of long. Well, we'll go through it anyway. It's fine. I have to double check my images. I can't remember if there's one in here that I need to select. Do, 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 do. Nope, there isn't. We're good. I'm going to cycle back to the hardcover one. Do, 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 do. Should be this one here, I think. Nope, that's the wrong one. That's the wrong book. There we go. No, not that one. The one that looks good. That one. That one looks better. Yes, it's a fly-by-night operation. Why do you ask? Oh, good. An AI is trying, well, some schmuck anyway on Twitch is trying to talk at me and convince me to go to a website where I'll definitely get computer diseases. Thanks, buddy, but no thanks. What even character is that? Is that Thai? Anyway. Chapter 2. The View Below the Water. 23 April, 1732 hours, Japan Standard Time. South entrance, Keio Line, Chofu Station, Chofu, Tokyo suburbs. Kaname and her friends sat in a burger joint under a department store. They munched on fries, talked, and messed around. Sosuke had followed them. He was currently sitting in a corner in the back, pretending to read a Tokyo sports paper he'd picked up 3 days ago in the station. But all the while he remained acutely focused on his surroundings. There was a figure in his field of vision that concerned him, a man in his late 20s with a medium height and build, sitting behind Kaname at one of the counter seats. He wore a gray beret low over his eyes, and had a black attache case at his feet. He kept checking his watch, as if very conscious of the time. That attache case, could it be? Sosuke wondered. It looked a lot like the one he'd seen in a War Against Terror weapons catalog. It had a built-in machine gun, and you could press a button to switch it to firing mode. The man finished off his hamburger and stood up, tray in hand. Is he making his move? Sosuke stood up. But the man just threw his trash away, placed his tray in the return, then hurried out. Or not, he thought. No, wait. The man had left the attache case behind. Could it be? Damn! Sosuke had heard about this M.O. from an acquaintance who'd fought terror in Italy, blowing up an entire business to take out an assassination target. But weren't they trying to abduct her? Sosuke thought. But then circumstances might have changed. Yes, he didn't have time to question it. Sosuke broke into a run. He turned over a table and shoved a customer out of the way to snatch up the attache case. It felt heavy in his hands. Just then Kaname turned around. Sagara-kun? Get down! He knocked over a few more customers as he charged out of the shop. Somewhere free of people. He looked around. It was a shopping district in early evening, so the sidewalks were packed. But across the street was a parking lot. That might just... Out of my way! Sosuke dashed out into the road. There was a blare of a horn. He turned to see a K truck bearing down on him. The driver failed to brake in time. Sosuke was hit and sent flying into a bicycle rack. Out of time! The world was spinning around him, his consciousness fading. He forced himself to his feet. Throw it! Throw the case! Throw the case somewhere safe! Hey, you okay? Suddenly, the man from before was standing in front of him. He took the attaché case from Sosuke, opened it, and looked inside. Oh, thank goodness, my manuscript's okay. Thanks for trying to bring it to me. Sosuke just stood there, stunned, as the man clapped him on the shoulder and walked swiftly away. A dozen people were staring at Sosuke, the truck driver, Kaname, and her friends among them, their faces a mixture of awe, confusion, and concern. Sakura-kun, what are you doing? Kyoko, standing beside Kaname, asked him. I thought it was a bomb, he said, and with that he collapsed. 23 April, 1920 hours, Japan Standard Time. Room 505, Tiger's apartment complex, Chofu, Tokyo. You're gonna get yourself killed before the week is out, Kurtz said as he bandaged Sosuke's head. We haven't seen one sign of an enemy so far, but you keep taking yourself out like this. Can't you just chill out? I'm trying, Sosuke moaned. That incident at the hamburger shop had been just one of many. It had been 4 days since his mission started, but Sosuke was still floundering at school. Every day he seemed to lose his cool, make trouble, destroy public property, disrupt class. He'd been yelled at both by Kagurazaka Eri and by Kaname herself. We get there eventually. His injuries were constant. He'd never suffered like this on a mission before. What's more, most of his injuries, falling downstairs, busting through glass, being crushed by library books, getting beaten by busts in the art room, were the result of things he had brought on himself. He knew that he was just off his rhythm, but that didn't mean he could stop it. Kurtz was right. He might die at that school, possibly very soon. You can't keep this up. Just tap out for tomorrow. Mao and I will stand watch outside the school. What if the kidnapper is inside the school? Sosuke demanded. They won't be. Honestly, we still don't know if they're after her, Kurtz breezed. Sosuke just scowled. It's dangerous to be too optimistic, he warned. We should consider all situations as possible. And that's the thinking that gets you hit by a truck, Kurtz told him. You ever hear the term solo sumo? Solo sumo? Yeah, solo sumo. Swinging yourself around by your own mawashi? Mawashi? You don't know that either? How are you even Japanese? There we go. Kurtz finished the wrapping and went back to the window. But here's one thing I don't get. Incidentally, that's clearly the Japanese equivalent of hoist by your own petard. But here's one thing I don't get. What? Kaname. She seems totally normal. I mean, sure, she's pretty, but not Mary the King of Monaco pretty. Nothing weird in her background either. Well, compared to you and me, anyway. True. I suppose you're right. It was only these last few days that Sosuke had realized how different his upbringing was from most of his peers. So why would the KGB be after her? Kurtz wondered. Same with the girl we found last week. I hear she was a totally normal student before they took her. What the hell do they get from kidnapping some foreign girl in high school and drugging the life out of her? I wouldn't know, Sosuke told him. Right? Same here. What the hell is the Major hiding from us? 23 April, 21:21 hours, West Pacific Standard Time, KGB Branch Office, Khabarovsk, Soviet Union.
When are you going to get it done already?
The colonel barked into the receiver. He had ordered the kidnapping 3 days ago. Soon, Gowron responded apathetically from the other end of the phone. The terrorist, nationality unknown, was currently staying in the Soviet embassy in Tokyo. In Tokyo, sorry. According to reports from the embassy staff, Gowron had mostly stayed inside since his arrival, making only a few brief contacts with his men. I'm currently laying groundwork. I need to do a lot of preparation to abduct the target safely.
Preparation? Just break in the middle of the night, grab her, and drive her to Niigata. What groundwork could you need for such a simple plan?
You need to stop being so impatient.
What did you say?
The colonel fumed. Mithril will have prepared for such a straightforward operation, Gowron predicted.
You think they have eyes on this Chai Dori Kanan?
Gowron chuckled at the colonel's crude pronunciation of Chidori Kaname. It seems that way, so I need to act carefully to avoid their notice.
What for? The colonel demanded. If they try to stop you, just eliminate them.
Not possible. Even if I sent all of my skilled men at the problem, we'd just end up dead for our troubles.
What do you mean by that?
I mean that they have an AS, Gowron explained. It's staking out the target with an ECS on invisibility mode.
Invisibility? Full invisibility? There's no way those devices are out of preliminary.
Gowron interrupted him condescendingly. Condescendingly? Didn't I tell you their technology was 10 years ahead? Forcing a fight will just invite trouble. They've likely put elite agents on the case.
But
Just leave it all to me. I'm preparing a method that will eliminate all chance of interference. You just be careful that you aren't sent to an internment camp. With that, the man hung up on him. 24 April, 14:38 hours, Japan Standard Time. Classroom 2-4, Jindai High School, Tokyo. Anyway, Kaname said, her back to the blackboard. It was afternoon homeroom. Time to get off our butts and pick duty assignments for the field trip, okay? It's only 4 or 5 days away now. She looked around the classroom. Some students were chatting with their neighbors, some were napping, some were reading the day's manga release. Hey, are you guys listening? There were a few scattered responses. We're listening. Figure it out so we can go already. Kaname sighed. You guys, I never should have agreed to do the class rep thing. But I figured this would happen, so I made a list in advance. All I need you guys to do is approve it. You rock, Chidori! One of the boys cried. Kaname flashed a smug V sign. No problem. Okay, here they are. She pulled out her notebook and started writing names and roles up on the blackboard. Clack, clack, clack. The white chalk rang out through the room. Food duty, Onda-kun and Sanamatsu. Luggage duty, Ayama-kun and Omura-san. Communications duty, Kazama-kun and Fuji-san. Event duty, Onodera-kun and Suzuki-san. And trash duty, since there were no volunteers, Sakara-kun. Sosuke, seated in the back and half listening, suddenly sat up, startled. What's wrong, Sagara-kun? Kaname asked. I don't recall consenting to that. He frowned. Oh, it's a rule at this school. All transfer students are required to perform trash duty. A stifled laugh rippled through the class, but Sosuke didn't understand what it meant. I see. Very well. We appreciate your understanding, Kaname told him brightly. I'll explain your duties later. Now, let's vote. And so, in a unanimous vote, elite mithril mercenary Sagara Sosuke was appointed to trash duty. 24 April, 11:13 hours, Greenwich Mean Time. Central Control Room, Tuatha De Danann, 50-meter depth, sea of Japan. Talitha Testarossa sat in the captain's chair of the dimly lit control room. Field trip? She tilted her head. Major Kalainen, who had come by to file his regular report, opened his folder and handed her a document and a pen.
Yes, it starts next week. We need you to approve a new secure channel so that we can maintain contact while he travels.
Tessa signed the document. It's a strange school, taking a field trip at this time of year. Where are they going?
Okinawa.
I see.
Tessa turned her eyes to the military data map at the center of the screen ahead of her. Then, her eyes falling on Okinawa in the corner, she said,
Did I ever tell you that I lived there for a while?
No, ma'am,
the major answered.
My father wanted me to go to a Japanese elementary school, but the children there kept me at arm's length, so I was eventually moved to a school on the base.
The nearby executive officer of the De Danann, Lieutenant Colonel Mardukas, cleared his throat. Tessa broke from her trance and looked back at the document.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have brought that up here.
Not at all, the fussy-looking Exo Mardukas said, but apparently disinclined to weigh in further, he just went back to his work. Kalainen politely ignored the exchange and resumed his report.
I also have new information regarding the broader issue,
he said, bringing things back to the original subject.
The Whispered?
Tessa clarified.
Yes, they're doing the research at the Khabarovsk facility. Look at this.
He handed her a bundle of documents. It was a long list of chemical substances, some circled in red here and there.
It's a list of rare drugs circulating in the USSR. According to the Intelligence Division's analysis,
Kalainen continued his explanation, handing her one new document after another. Tessa took it all in, quickly scanning through each page she received.
Is the Khabarovsk facility the only one involved? She asked.
That's where the Intelligence Division reports. That's what the Intelligence Division reports.
That seems unlikely. Tell them to continue their investigation.
Yes, ma'am.
In fact, Kalainen had already given them that order, but he opted not to say it.
Now, can the Khabarovsk facility's computer be hacked?
Tessa inquired. It would make things easier if it could be. They could just access it using their computer here. The computer system of the Tuatha De Danann could perform functions far beyond a standard warship's control system. Its complexity was on par with a large mammal's central nervous system, and its processing power put even the communication system of the U.S. Armed Forces to shame. It would be a trivial matter for a system like theirs to infiltrate a Soviet computer. But Kalainen rejected that possibility.
The laboratory's computer doesn't have an outside line. We'll need to stomp out their research through physical means.
I see. A cruise missile, then?
They didn't need ASs to take out their target wholesale.
Yes, a G-type Tomahawk should be enough. One strike from an FAE warhead should devastate the facility.
You have my permission, Tessa told him, but try to do it late at night on a weekend.
She hoped that would reduce the possibility of casualties. The researchers' lodging houses were about a kilometer away from the lab itself.
Use Sting to collect the latest pictures, she continued, referring to their observation satellite. Find out as much as you can about who goes there, when, where, and in what numbers.
Understood. Now, regarding the arbalest.
Kalainen handed her another document. Just then, the mountain of papers Tessa had cradled in her arms spilled out onto the floor.
I'm sorry.
She quickly moved to pick them up. Kalainen and the XO helped.
I'm sorry to drag you into this, Mardukas-san.
Not at all. XO Mardukas handed the collected documents to Kalainen and said with annoyance, Major Kalainen, would you kindly switch away from paper already?
I'll try, sir.
Rubbing his temples, the XO went back to work.
So, is this the document? Tessa asked. The 7 oaths of trash duty?
No, ma'am, Kalainen said, and gently lifted away the report that Sosuke had sent. 25 April, 1635 hours, Japan Standard Time. Hachimoto-bound local express, Keio Line, Tokyo suburbs. Kaname bookmarked her paperback and stood up. All right, enough is enough.
She stomped through the train car to where Sosuke was sitting and planted her feet in front of him. As always, he was reading a newspaper. "What is your problem with me?" she said, enunciating every syllable. Chidori? Sosuke feigned surprise. What a coincidence. Are you freaking kidding me? You're still pulling that? Kaname snatched the paper out of his hand and looked it over. Schwartzy throws hat into governor's race. This is from days ago. I can read an old paper if I want to. That is so not the point, she fumed. Why do you keep following me? Me? Following you? Sosuke questioned. I honestly don't know what you're talking about. You seem a bit self-involved. I'd have to be more self-involved not to notice this harassment. You've been on me every day from dawn to dusk. If you want to say something to me, say it. I told you it's a coincidence. There was a prolonged silence, filled only by the sounds of the train and a conductor's announcement. Next station, Kokurio. This train stops at Kokurio. Kaname tossed the paper aside, causing an elderly passenger nearby to frown at her. The train stopped at Kokurio Station, and the doors opened with a whish. You're saying it's just a coincidence? She asked at last. Yes, it's a coincidence. Fine. A split second before the doors closed, Kaname leaped out onto the platform. Whish. Through the glass of the closed doors, Kaname could see Sosuke panic. She'd outsmarted him. She smiled triumphantly and waved. Bye-bye, Mr. Pervert! The train began to move away, carrying Sosuke with it. Bag in hand, Kaname walked toward a bench to have a seat. Just then, as the train was about to leave the station, Sosuke came hurtling out of the window. He fell, back first onto the concrete, bounced, rolled, and only stopped when he crashed into the fence at the edge of the platform. For a moment she could only stare. Are you for real? Sosuke's body just lay there, silently. Kaname ran up, knelt down next to him, and shook him. Hey, are you okay? Suddenly, he sat up as if nothing had happened, said, Not an issue, and proceeded to stand up and dust off his pants. Are you insane? She screamed. What were you thinking? I just realized that I had to get off at this station, Sosuke explained innocently. It had nothing to do with you. I can't believe you're still trying that. It's a coincidence. Uh-huh. Kaname shook her head and sat down on a nearby bench. Sosuke sat down next to her and resumed reading the paper he'd picked up intently. And it's just a coincidence that you want to sit here, too? Correct. Boy, you really are something. She propped her head up on her knees and gave Sosuke a side-eye. For some strange reason, his presence wasn't creeping her out. He'd transferred to their school, burst in on her while she was changing, and seemed to follow her every day. Most people would call that stalking. Kaname had too, at first, but something about that didn't add up. There was nothing about Sagara Sosuke that suggested lecherous thoughts or impure motives. There was too much dignity in his profile. What was the term? The fire of will? He radiated the single-minded focus of an athlete before a match, that look of perfect calm that came from focusing all of one's efforts on one single goal. But that just made things more confusing. What reason could he possibly have for following her like this? Hey, Sagara-kun, she said after a while. Yes? Could you please just tell me what's going on? I promise I won't get mad. I don't know what you're talking about. You just happen to be where I am. It was his standard response, spoken matter-of-factly. Kaname decided that questioning him was pointless. Yeah, well, we'll leave it at that. Then could your classmate who just happens to be where you are ask a question? Certainly, he told her. You lived overseas for a long time, right? Were things like this at your old school, too? Sosuke held a moment of silence, then said, Yes, I had a very uneventful life. She pressed on. But aren't you lonely? You left all your friends behind. No, We keep in touch via phone calls and letters, so I didn't strictly leave them behind. That's a weird way to respond. I found it appropriate, he protested. Okay, well, were you dating anyone? Dating? Yeah, a girlfriend, Kaname clarified. A sweetheart, that kind of thing. I don't know anyone who could qualify, Sosuke confessed. My comrade, my friend, likes to say you couldn't find someone to date you even in a remote Chinese village. Kaname cracked up. That's pretty hilarious. Do you understand what he meant? Yeah, I think so. I mean, you're a total weirdo, Sagara-kun. Am I? Yeah, major weird. Kaname giggled to herself a little more, then said, But that uniqueness could be a good thing. Maybe there's a nice girl out there who'll really get what you're all about. She wasn't even thinking about whether she herself would be categorized as being a nice girl or not. I'll keep that in mind, he told her. You're very nice. Hey, don't take it too seriously. I don't know anything about it. I see. I'll forget it then. Yeah, you're a total weirdo. Kaname laughed once again. At some point in the conversation, she'd noticed a warmth spreading through her body. It was like when a stray dog on the street started following you, a pleasant feeling with a tiny hint of loneliness at its core. She found herself thinking, maybe I'll let this go a little longer. A voice over the speakers announced the arrival of the next train. If you want an entire movie dedicated towards the purpose of demonstrating what it feels the interactions between someone, a military individual, paramilitary individual, and a girl with the whole stray dog vibe thing, following you vibe thing, highly recommend checking out the movie. I kid you not, Stray Dog. Sequel, technically, to it's kind of both a sequel and sidequel to sequel and prequel and sidequel to the movie The Red Spectacles. If you've ever seen the OVA animated movie Jinro, uh, they are the live action predecessors to that. They are somewhat less horrible to the characters. Slightly less horrible things happen to the cast involved. Slightly. They're pretty good. Both by Mamoru Oshii, of, well, Jinro and Patlabor and the Ghost in the Shell original animated movie and a number of other things that I can't be bothered to remember off the top of my head. Angel's Egg, too, I think. I think he did Angel's Egg. Anyway, bit of an auteur, that one. Does a pretty good job of doing re-releases, high definition re-releases of his material. Anyway, a voice over the speakers announced the arrival of the next train. 25 April, 1905 hours, Greenwich Mean Time. Tuatha De Danann. Periscope depth. Sea of Japan. Diffused moonlight danced just beneath the ocean's surface. Silently rising through it came a hull as black as pitch. The Tuatha De Danann, an amphibious assault submarine, resembled a shark with a stubby dorsal fin, increased in size by a few orders of magnitude. It looked like one of Shinjuku's towering skyscrapers set on its side in the water. The massive thing slid through the sea on its own power, quietly, ever so quietly. Movement could be seen in the vessel's aft, the opening of a cruise missile launch tube hatch, the firing of a silver cylinder. Raising a trail of sea spray as it burst forth, the Tomahawk missile dropped its rear booster and spread its guidance wings. It rose higher and higher into the night sky, then came parallel to the water, and flew off over the north horizon. Launch sequence complete. Now closing MVLS hatch, the fire control officer said, down in the central control room. Well done, Tessa responded with a nod. We'll now dive to 100 meters and shift to a southward course. Green letters on the main screen's status board announced that all hatches were now closed. She confirmed the status of each, then turned to her executive officer. "Rigged for dive, Captain." The XO, Lieutenant Colonel Mardukas, replied. He was tall, lanky, and pale, with black-rimmed glasses on his nose. He looked less like a military man and more like a technician. "Then take her down. Flood main ballast tank," Tessa ordered with perfect confidence. 10 degrees down bubble. Make your speed 10 knots. When given their first command, even 10-year veterans of submarine life would frequently find their voices trembling when it came time to give orders. It should be even more daunting on the Tuatha De Danann, the world's most advanced submarine. And yet, this young girl showed no hesitance. "Aye, aye, Mom. Flooding main ballast tank. 10 degrees down bubble. Speed 10 knots. Oh, sorry, that's the navigator. "Aye, aye, ma'am. Flooding main ballast tank. 10 degrees down bubble. Speed 10 knots," the navigator echoed. Soon the boat tilted and entered its dive. The cruise missile's launch wouldn't go unnoticed. They had to leave the area as quickly as possible. They could determine whether the missile had accomplished its task through the use of Mithril's surveillance satellite, Sting. "So, we'll know in 3 hours, correct?" "Yes," he replied. "Why don't you rest until then?" Tessa shrugged off XO Mardukas's suggestion. "I'd like to, but I think I'd just have bad dreams." The cruise missile was still in flight, after all. If it successfully hit the facility, it would take more than 5 years for the enemy to rebuild it. The intelligence division's final report was that Khabarovsk was their only whispered research facility. They'd checked around the country repeatedly and found no other location with comparable equipment. Comparable, not compatible. Comparable equipment. "Now, Major, once the laboratory is destroyed, can we recall the bodyguards?" Tessa asked as she sat back in her chair. Kalainen, who had been watching over the operation by her side, responded, "Yes. However—" "Is there an issue?" "No, I'm sure it's a groundless fear." But his expression remained grim. 26 April, 10:38 hours, West Pacific Standard Time. KGB Branch Office, Khabarovsk, Soviet Union.
The laboratory's been destroyed! The colonel screamed into the receiver. A missile attack of all things! Absurd! We've lost all of our experimental data on the Whispered, as well as all information about them.
"My condolences," Gowron said with biting indifference on the other end of the line.
Well, we won't be needing the girl anymore, the colonel fumed. We couldn't do any research even if we had her.
"I see. That's too bad."
That means the kidnapping is off, which means we can't pay you.
Completely understandable. Completely understandable. Gowron's unflappable behavior had the colonel suspicious.
What's going on here?
He asked at length. "What do you mean?"
You seem quite composed for a man who's lost his source of income.
"There will be other jobs," Gowron remarked casually. "I'll just go back to my former employer with my little souvenir."
Souvenir?
There came a tap, tap, tap on the other end of the phone. "My dear Colonel, do you know what this is?"
What? No.
"It's a DVD. Makes a nice sound, doesn't it? And it's packed with delicious data." Gowron let out a muffled laugh.
Is that our research data?
The colonel asked incredulously.
When the hell did you?
"That's a trade secret. Of course, I knew you'd be angry, so I took a few other measures. Goodbye, Colonel. Do watch your health in the internment camp." Gowron hung up. Someone knocked on his office door. Before the colonel could answer, 3 armed soldiers burst in.
Colonel Smirnov?
a young lieutenant asked. Party headquarters has grown concerned about your side dealings. They believe you've been siphoning state resources in a way that is proven detrimental.
Wait a minute. I.
You can explain everything at Lubyanka. Come with us. For a Russian, those words meant death. He'd be sent to an internment camp, undergo merciless interrogations. There was nothing left in his future but suffering. Slumping, the colonel let the soldiers take him away. April 2000, 2001 hours, Japan Standard Time. Room 505, Tiger's apartment complex, Chofu, Tokyo. Being cooped up in a room all day is a refreshing change of pace, Sosuke thought. Today was Sunday, so Kaname had stayed in her apartment until noon. She'd eventually gone out, nominally to buy things for the field trip, so Kurtz had gone to Taylor with Mao's arm slave backup. That left Sosuke to monitor Kaname's apartment. There was no sign of suspicious activity. At one point, a middle-aged woman with a child came by and rang her doorbell, but that didn't seem cogent to their mission. Kaname returned at last a little after 8 o'clock. 20:06 hours. Angel returns home. Nothing to report, he whispered into the nearby microphone. Not long after, Kurtz made it back, seeming to be in a lively mood. I'm back! Oh, I see you're hard at work, Sergeant Downer Man. As he approached, Sosuke picked up the distinct smell of beer. Eyes still focused on the camera view monitor, he asked Kurtz, You were drinking on a mission? Come on, I didn't have a choice. I was only going to have one, but Kyoko-chan kept insisting, he said, leering. What did you say? Sosuke said, shocked. Kaname's friend, Kyoko? Yep, Kaname, Kyoko, Yuka, and Shiori. I went right at 'em with my lost foreigner routine. Oh, thank you so much. Japanese girls are so nice. Kurtz laughed wickedly. His personality wasn't cut out for tailing people in secret, so he'd apparently just walked up and made friends. You idiot! What the hell were you thinking? Mao radioed from her AS as she got back into the trailer. Aw, but they're such cutie pies, Kurtz whined. After days of one stupid bitch for company, I needed an oasis. Kurtz, this is a top-secret bodyguard mission, Sosuke said critically. Why were you socializing with them? Huh? Are you stupid? Becoming friends means you can be up close, which makes the bodyguarding and surveillance tons easier. Emotional involvement can cloud your judgment. To maintain level-headedness and objectivity. Who fights their battles totally on logic? Kurtz demanded to know. When shit's about to get real, it's your gut that tells you, not your head. But, am I wrong? Sosuke fell silent. There was nothing he could say. He felt like the point at argument had shifted somehow at some point. I'm afraid I can't accept your point of view, he said at last. Noting Sosuke's thoughtful expression, Kurtz grinned and said, They talked about you, too. Boy, did they ever. Oh, yeah, we had that weirdo transfer student, right, Kana-chan? And such. Sosuke's ear twitched. What did they say? Kurtz smiled triumphantly. You wanna know? No. Well, actually, for the sake of the mission, I think I should hear it. Wrong answer. You gotta say, please tell me, sir. Sosuke said nothing, but his gaze suddenly intensified. Hey, just kidding. Don't go nuts on me. Oh, whoa. Kurtz also turned serious as he flew to one of the monitors. Sosuke hadn't gone quiet because he was angry. He had noticed something on the screen. 21:21 hours. Suspicious figure on the balcony. I'm going to investigate. Sosuke said into the recorder, then stood up. The monitor's display was of the balcony side of Kaname's apartment building.
They'd installed a hidden camera on the roof of the building opposite it. On the screen's left side, they could see a man clambering up the drainpipe. He was dressed all in black, his face obscured by a cloth mask. "You don't think a solo operation?" Sosuke asked, as he screwed a silencer onto his 9mm handgun. "Can't say. He could have buddies nearby. We'd better check out the nearby cars," Kurtz responded, pulling out a sniper rifle with a night vision scope. Through the radio, Mao's voice chimed in. "Urus 2 to team. We need to neutralize that man. Urus 6, head for the building across from the apartment. Get to where the camera's planted. Urus 6 here. Roger that." Kurtz would be backing up Sosuke from a sniper position. "Urus 7, you go take him down directly. I'll stand watch in the parking lot." "Understood. Give me 120 seconds." Picking up a rappelling rope and equipment set, Sosuke flew out of the room. Two minutes later, he had arrived on the roof of Kaname's apartment. He affixed the rope to the rail and swiftly wrapped the other end around his body. He looked down and saw the figure climbing from the third floor to the fourth. Kurtz's voice spoke over his FM radio receiver. "Urus 6 to team. I'm in position. I don't see anyone suspicious around. I think it really might be a solo job." "Keep an eye out around you," Sosuke ordered, "especially your 6. "Who do you think you're talking to, dumbass?" Just then they heard from Mao in the M9 again. "Urus 7, she's taking a shower in the bathroom right now. We couldn't ask for better timing. Take him down before she gets out." "Urus 7, roger that." "Don't kill him." "I won't." Sosuke threw himself from the rope. Sosuke threw. Vowel sounds are hard. "I won't." Sosuke threw himself from the roof. He made no sound except for the slight friction from the climbing rope. He kicked twice off the wall and was bearing down on the enemy in an instant. The intruder, who was just climbing over the balcony railing, didn't even notice him. Sosuke slowed his descent speed and kicked hard off the wall. Then, with a lithe twist of his body, he pounced on the man from behind. "Don't move!" The man gasped in shock. Sosuke got him in a lock and pressed his gun to the back of his head. "It's all over. Don't say a word." The man nodded, trembling. "Good. It's good that you value your life." Sosuke directed the man to lie face down on the balcony. There he straddled him and gave him a thorough pat-down. He wasn't carrying any weapons, but Sosuke did find a wallet in his back pocket. He took it out and looked through it. He furrowed his brow. Inside the wallet was a student ID. Kazama Shinji, number 10, class 2-4, Jindai High School. That was the same school that Sosuke attended. The same class at that. "Urus 6 to Urus 7. "What?" "Sosuke." "Sosuke." "Oh, sorry. Urus 6 to Urus 7. "What?" "Sosuke. Look at what's in his hands." The man was holding bundles of cloth in both hands. What are... "They're panties," Kurtz told him. "Oh, the alluring white of purity. Urus 6 out." Sosuke glanced at the building across the way and made out Kurtz's silhouette in the dark. The man waved as if to say, "Yeah, we're done here," then started packing up his sniper rifle. "Give me a damn break," Mao groaned. Sosuke saw a small rippling in the air in the parking lot, moving away from him. It was the ECS camouflaged M9, withdrawing to its trailer. "What's going on here?" The baffled Sosuke removed the man's mask. It turned out it wasn't a man, but a boy. A boy with a slender, childlike, unassuming face. He was pale with fright, and all he did in response was shake his head. "You can talk," Sosuke told him. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, the boy cried. "Keep your voice down." Sosuke pressed the gun against him again in panic. The boy's voice, the lips, the tip of the tongue, the teeth. The boy's voice dropped to a whisper. "I'm sorry. Please don't arrest me." "I'm not with the police," Sosuke admitted, "but please tell me what's going on." You won't arrest me?" "No, it's all right." Sosuke pulled away to let the boy sit up. Th- Thanks. Hey, aren't you Sagara-kun from our class?" "No." "Huh? But no." Sosuke cocked his gun. "Right," the boy agreed shakily. But what are you doing here?" "Never mind about me. You. Kazama, was it? What are you doing here?" Kazama Shinji showed him the half-dried underwear in his hands. "I'm stealing your underwear, see? Is that why you're here too?" "No," Sosuke said flatly. "I just happened to be passing by." "Oh, I see." Shinji tilted his head, but didn't argue the point. "Why were you stealing her garments?" "Well, they're not for me or anything. Murano's gang—" "Murano?" Kazama Shinji explained the situation. They were apparently one of those delinquent groups, the kind every school had at least one of, and they'd ordered Shinji to steal Kaname's underwear. Shinji was a member of the photography club, and they'd stolen the negatives for a set of photos he'd spent a whole year taking. "They threatened you?" Sosuke asked. "Not quite that bad. It was more of a show us what you're made of kind of thing," Shinji explained. "And Chidori Kaname is Jindai High's prettiest girl you don't want to date." The delinquents had likely had some sort of warped affection for Kaname. That's why they'd come up with this childish prank. It was utterly foolish. "I think I understand," Sosuke said at last. "But you're going to make trouble for her." He was forgetting all the trouble he himself had made for her. "I know, but I really want to get my negatives back." "What are the pictures of?" "Arm slaves from the USFJ and the JSDF." "Oh?" Sosuke found himself leaning forward with interest. "I took them at bases all around Japan. It was a ton of work." Shinji trailed off. "You like that stuff too, right, Sagara-kun?" "Well, I wouldn't say I like it exactly." "I even got a picture of a Marine M6 in Okinawa." The M6 was an AS first deployed in the early 90s. They'd had a role in the Gulf War, so they'd been frequently shown on the news, which had brought them a measure of public affinity. "Oh?" Sosuke asked curiously. "Did you get the A2 also?" "Yeah. Wow, you know your stuff. It had a reactive armor shield." "I see. How did it move in practice?" "Well, the base guy said the balance wasn't great," Shinji told him. "It's got that Rockwell MSO11 operating system, you know? There's a lot of flab in the feedback architecture, so with a bilateral angle of more than 3.5, you get swung around by the weight of your gun, and the torque balance with the tip weight is already so clunky." Sosuke nodded over and over as he listened to the jargon-laden rant. "I see. That follows." "They're best for ambushes or suicide runs, I think. The new M9's got much better specs, and with a Bofors 40mm rifle—" At some point, the two of them had struck up a real conversation. Kazami Shinji's knowledge of military matters was stunning, even to a professional soldier like Sosuke. Perhaps because he was an objective party, he had a unique, specific perspective. Sosuke entirely forgot the theft of panties to let his geek flag fly. "Your knowledge is impressive," he commented. "It's hard to believe you're a civilian." "Oh, no, I still have a lot to learn. You're very knowledgeable as well, Sagara-kun." "Oh, not at all." But the blossoming of this sad, nerdy friendship was cut short when the balcony door rattled open. "Oh." Kaname was standing there, wearing nothing but a bath towel. She must not have realized they were there, because as she saw them she went rigid. The towel exposed her shapely cleavage and long, curvy legs. Her wet black hair clung to her porcelain shoulders. "What are you doing?" Kaname asked at length, hand tightening on the towel's closure. "Ah!" It was then that Sosuke realized he'd been keeping his hands busy by playing with a pair of her panties. Nevertheless, he was able to say, with a completely straight face, "Chidori! What a coincidence!" Kaname stormed back to her room to fetch her metal bat.
That's quite a mark, Kurtz said as he laid a wet compress on his friend's arm. She really went after me. I tried to help Kazama escape, but he fell into the brush below. From the 4th floor? Yes, Sosuke confirmed. He hit a cherry tree first, and then the ground. Were you trying to kill him? I was in danger too, Sosuke protested. I just barely managed to escape, but I wonder what the Major would say if I was killed by my protectee. I think I can imagine, Kurtz commented. He would sigh, then fill out documentation regarding the articles of the deceased, then move on to his next duty. Major Andrei Kalainen was not a man to be surprised by death, no matter where, how, or to whom it happened. I think she really hates me this time. Yeah, I'll bet. A little while later, they got a call from Mao in the M9. Hey guys, I was just in contact with the Danan. That is too many D's. Do we have new orders? Yeah, looks like our mission is over. The enemy has no further reason to kidnap Kaname. What does that mean? Apparently, they blew up the base of the people who were after her. All the data and everything, Mao explained. So we can rest easy for now. Sosuke had never quite known all the details of the matter, but it sounded like the problem had been cut off at the root. When will we return to the submarine, then? Actually, we get a week off. We'll get our next mission after that. You mean it? Yippee! Kurtz joyfully threw his hands into the air. Sosuke's reaction was more conflicted. I was supposed to go on a field trip in 2 days. It's a 4-night affair. And you've been told to have fun, Mao shared with him. The Major said that? Sosuke asked. Yeah, they already paid your travel expenses, so go and get your money's worth. Apparently, that's an order. But, go on, Sosuke, Kurtz coaxed him. We know Kaname's out of the woods, so why don't you go and relax a little? Enjoy life as a normal high school student. Sosuke meditated on Kurtz's words. Very well, he decided. It could be a valuable experience. April 28, 08:15 hours, Japan Standard Time. Passenger waiting area. Haneda Airport, Tokyo. Have fun, they had said. But starting the next day, Sosuke was having anything but. He'd been freed from the constraints of his mission, and he didn't know what to do with that freedom. Kaname did indeed seem to hate him. Even if they made eye contact, she'd just turn away and storm out with Kyoko or her other friends. She wouldn't even acknowledge his presence. I guess it makes sense, Kazama Shinji lamented as they sat together on an airport bench. She caught you on the veranda, chatting and messing with her panties. Who wouldn't be mad? Ever since that night, Shinji never missed a chance to strike up a conversation with Sosuke. It could be an obligation to his partner in crime, or simply an affinity for his fellow geek. The second-year students of Jindai High School were in the airport's waiting area, getting ready to board their plane to Okinawa. Class 2 had already boarded, and the students from Class 3 were passing noisily through the gate now. Sosuke and Kaname were in Class 4. Come on, Shigara-kun, Shinji told him. Cheer up already. Sure, Sosuke agreed. He wished he could go back to the Tuatha De Danann. I've got to find out how that's actually pronounced. If anyone actually knows how that's pronounced, please do not hesitate to throw me a line. I don't know. I've listened to it and I can't remember. I'll have to double check. There it is. He wished he could go back to the Tuatha De Danann. He'd have plenty of distractions there, with preparations for his next mission. Why in the world had he agreed to go on a field trip? Okay, Class 4, it's time, so have your boarding passes ready, Miss Kagurazaka, their homeroom teacher, shouted out. You heard her, Sagara-kun, Shinji announced cheerfully. Time to board. Right, Sosuke agreed, gazing at the jumbo jet's fuselage through the windows in the hall.
The stewardess breathed a sigh of relief once all the students were settled on the plane. The flight to Okinawa would be carrying the students of Jindai High School, alongside about 80 unrelated passengers. The regular passengers were sure to complain about the rowdy students. The separation of the seating was a placebo solution. Just thinking about the hours that lay ahead brought her an early morning headache. "Excuse me." A question by a boarding passenger snapped the stewardess back to attention. The man held out his boarding pass. "Could you help me find my seat?"
Of course, sir, she said after a pause. Let me show you.
With the will of a professional, she forced her expression into a gentle smile. "It must be tough," he remarked, "having so many teenagers on board."
Oh, not at all. Oh, not at all.
"I couldn't stand it myself. I'd end up dumping them all at 8,000 meters."
What?
"You know, I'd kill them. It would make things a lot quieter," he suggested, "and then I could enjoy a peaceful journey through the skies. Right?"
Sir?
"Just kidding. Ah, there I am." The passenger laughed and headed for his seat.
What an unsettling laugh,
The stewardess thought. 28 April, 09:58 hours, Japan Standard Time. JAL Flight 903, Tokyo Airspace. The jumbo jet left Haneda and smoothly finished its ascent. This was Kyoko's first time on a plane, so she'd spent the whole time with her face pressed to the window, eyes shining. The sky was clear, allowing a full view of Tokyo stretching out beneath them.
Wow! Hey, is that the Rainbow Bridge? It's so cool! She crowed.
Oh, I had the wrong. I was going to say. I had the wrong character in mind. Sorry.
Wow! Hey, is that the Rainbow Bridge? It's so cool! She crowed.
Sure, Kaname agreed absently.
Kana-chan, are you listening?
Uh-huh.
Look! Kyoko pointed. The Statue of Liberty!
Wow.
The Eiffel Tower!
Sure is. Kaname, too, was in no mood for fun. Kyoko poked at her.
Hey, what's with you? She asked. You were acting weird yesterday, too. Did something happen? Not really.
Kaname was mad at herself, more than anything. She'd shown Sagarasosuke a tiny bit of interest at the train station last week, and that was her reward? He really was a freak, and a geek, and a pervert stalker creep.
I was so stupid to trust him, she thought,
and it couldn't help but depress her.
Is this about Sagara-kun?
Kyoko asked, cutting right to the quick.
Well, where did that come from?
Kaname asked shakily. Of course not. Ha 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 ha. That was the conversation over signal, but Kyoko persevered.
I knew it, she said. On Sunday you were all, maybe he's not such a bad guy after all. And then on Monday you had him on full cold shoulder mode. What did he do to you?
Nothing.
Hey, Kana-chan, if it's you know what, you can tell me, okay?
Huh? Kyoko took Kaname's hand.
You really should go to the hospital, too. I'll go with you.
Hey.
Then after that, you gotta make him pay for it. There are lots of lawyers who specialize in this stuff,
Kyoko advised her.
You'll be fine since you're a girl.
What are you talking about? Kaname cried. Just then, the plane bucked. It rocked first to the left, then to the right. Kyoko let out a shriek.
It's okay. This stuff is pretty normal,
Kaname said casually. Indeed, the rocking had already stopped.
It is a little weird, though, with the weather this nice.
The students in the seats at the front were whispering about something. Finding it odd, Kaname tapped the shoulder of a friend in the row ahead of her.
What's going on?
I'm not really sure,
her friend told her.
Someone said they heard a pop before the shaking started.
A pop?
Just then there was a cabin announcement. It was a man's voice, and it sounded like the captain.
Attention passengers, we had a little turbulence from an approaching low-pressure area. There may be a little more shaking as we change course, but there's no need to worry.
That was all.
That's strange,
Kaname whispered. Kyoko looked concerned.
Why? I think they usually say, we appreciate your patience, not no need to worry.
Indeed, Kaname was correct. But that's where we'll leave it for this week. We're about to have. You'll notice that there's kind of a rhythmic pattern to most of the series, where things will go from action sequence to rom-com shenanigans to action sequence again, and that's kind of what we're gearing up for. Um, it starts slow, but it goes places. It's an entertaining ride. I promise we get to very interesting locales already. Interesting locations, plot-wise. We'll touch on even next week, I think. Anyway, so that's the first third or so of the first book of the, I think it's 12 books long, of the Full Metal Panic exclamation point series. Um, Parts of it are kind of lowbrow, but not terribly so. It's relatively chaste. Um, it won't be terribly graphic. The violence is more graphic, if anything. We'll get a bit of that. But yeah, it's a cute one. Pretty well translated. I don't know about the honorifics and their need. It kind of throws my rhythm a little bit, but we'll make it work. Um, yeah. So what I'm kind of planning on doing is plowing through the first collector's edition volume, which is the first three books, and then doing something else for a while, and then switching back after a bit is the general plan. So for schedule going forward, next several weeks, many weeks, we'll have that to look forward to. Wednesday, we're going to be doing more of Absolution by Jeff Vandermeer. Dramatic things are happening to Old Jim. Wow, we're already like halfway through. I'm kind of impressed. I didn't think we'd be that far along. And then on Fridays, we're going through The Lazarus Effect by Bill Ransom and Frank Herbert. We've only just started that, so miles to go before we sleep as far as that's concerned. But yeah, cute times ahead. Let's see, is there anything else? You'll notice some definite similarities between Sosuke and Sosuke Sagara and Rei Fukai. The stoic, disconnected, borderline automaton or robotic protagonist is something that Yukikaze kind of formalized. So I'm sort of glad, incidentally, we got around to doing that before this. This is kind of taking that character and putting it in a rom-com situation. That kind of a character, that character archetype. While also having thrilling action sequences as well, which we'll be getting to. Anyway, that'll do it for today. Hopefully people enjoyed. If people are interested in listening to my read through of Echopraxia, I now have a link up in the Discord that I've got there, which I've got in the stream description and the channel description. I've got to get the Twitch channel description updated. I have not done that. I need to do that. Wherein and I've got a permalinked, well, relatively permalinked link to a Google Drive that has them all in MP3 format, which should be usable by just about anyone. They're not perfectly labeled, so you will have to do a little relabeling yourself. Normally, I'm better about that. Sorry, and I'm too lazy to get rid of it and re-upload it because I'm a bum. It's a bit shy of a gigabyte in size, so just make sure you have some free room. Not that that should be an issue, but I figure I'll mention it. The audio quality is probably marginally worse than the actual broadcast quality, because I think most of them are copies of copies that have been downscaled. But hopefully it's okay. If there's any problems with them, please do not hesitate to tell me. I'm going to stop short of putting up a link to the Google Drive on YouTube for the the playlist description. I don't want no trouble, boss. I don't want no trouble from the authorities that be.
So unfortunately for now, you will have to go to the Discord to get it. But I don't care if you stay. Like if that's the only reason you're joining and then you dip off, that's totally fine. I don't care. Um, you can hang around if you want. You don't have to. No obligation to join the Discord. I'm not doing anything like, oh, well, if you join the Discord, you get exclusive content. No, no. That technically counts, I guess, but that's not the intent. Um, I don't really have the mountains of time required to do extra super secret streams, which is probably one of the reasons I don't have a Patreon beyond the general laziness factor. Um, I may set up like a buy me a coffee account because people have expressed an interest in throwing money my way. I can neither encourage nor discourage such behavior. I can get one up if people want to throw it my way, they can, but I'm going to keep doing this regardless, so don't feel obligated. I'm not holding it hostage. I'm going to do it as a fun hobby regardless. Sorry if my voice and head sound rough. Sundays are long days for me. Anyway, with that, we shall call it good. Hopefully, people enjoyed. If you didn't enjoy, tell me about it. If you did enjoy, tell me about it. If you don't want to tell me about it, don't tell me about it. Yeah. Oh, is this community interaction? Who knows? Um, if you have book suggestions, throw them my way. If you have requests, throw them my way. If you want to tell me the price of eggs in Montana, go right ahead. I wouldn't know. I'm not in Montana, so I cannot tell you. Well, actually, I could be, but I'm not going to tell you either way. So there. Wah! I could be lying about everything.
You'll never find out until it's too late.
I could be right behind you. I could not be right behind you. I'm not stealthy. Anyway, that's it. I think. Yes, that's it. Alrighty. Toodaloo! Oh, wait, I didn't do the spiel. Stay safe, stay sane, or be decent to each other. If you want to catch me live, I am live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, starting at about 12 noon, U.S. East Coast time, or Eastern Standard Time, or UTC minus 5. Yep. Stay safe, stay sane, be decent to each other. There we go. We did it. I'm not discombobulated at all. No, sir. What gave you this impression? Nothing could have done this. It is impossible. You're definitely good times.